waiting for them. Arriving at the destination, they get out of the car. The protagonist looks around. The girl says this is the house where you will stay. She says the protagonist didn't want a big house, so she made an effort to find a smaller one and adds that if he needs anything, he should just call her. The trainer says the protagonist doesn't have much luggage, so they will go straight to the gym. Kay says this is his gym and it is called Lions Boxing Club. When the trainer arrives, everyone watches. The manager says this gym can be considered the largest in the country with many benefits. Carmen continues to talk about the gym. The people look at the protagonist, impressed by his newness. A boy also watches him. Carmen says most of the boxers in the gym are professionals, but few are trained by the trainer. Our boy says he understands. The girl gets angry, saying these geniuses always have the same attitude. Kay introduces you to another trainer named Arnaud and adds that soon they will give the protagonist a tour and get accustomed. The trainer notices you looking at another corner. Kay says those posters are world champions he trained himself. They are so worthy that their names mark the boxing world. The one on the right is his best masterpiece, but at this moment he is already at another gym. Kay tells Carmen to prepare 2 heavyweight slots tomorrow for you. She agrees. The trainer silently asks you to watch closely to realize that there are also monsters like him. In a championship, people are screaming. From above, the trainer and you observe a fight happening below. The guy in the ring looks scared. We see a monster directing a blow at him, followed by several punches. The world champion's fierce attacks continue. The other guy is struggling, his arms are being crushed. In the end, he is knocked out. The fight is over. The challenger is being taken away on a stretcher. Everyone asks if there is anyone who can take the belt from the invincible champion. The trainer laughs, saying the guy has the same destructive power as always, and then asks you to listen to those cheers, because in the near future, people will go crazy for him. All the wealth, fame, and honor will be his. Kay shouts that he will make you a king. In his thoughts, he says that finally, the moment of his dream coming true is approaching and adds that he is looking forward to it. In an unfathomable darkness, you saw that oppression is under the sun, and there is no comfort for the weak, and power is on the side of the oppressors. He then declared that the dead are happier than the living, but better than both is the one who has never been born. You remembers the words of that light, saying that someday they would meet again at the top when the protagonist is stronger. In the middle of the night, you was awake in his dark room. He gets up with his dead eyes. The protagonist strokes the kitten. The next day at the gym, we see the old man and another boy. The trainer says that Josh wants to fight you, and if he wins, he wants to take him as an apprentice. While the boy agrees, Kay says if the boy can even scratch him, he will make him a champion. Sometime later, Josh is getting ready. Everyone around talks about the fight the boy will have against you and adds that you is a genius. But Josh is not weak either. The boy seems angry. We see that a moment ago, Josh was complaining to the trainer because he had won a youth competition, and most professionals respect him. Kay says he has said many times that in the world, a boy's talent is nothing special. On his short trip, he found 2 people with more talent than him, and it's not fun to train someone whose limits are obvious. The boy is a bit furious, but says he only needs 1 punch, then asks the trainer if he really just needs to scratch him. Josh shouts that he will crush you and prove him wrong. Kay says he is looking forward to it. In the present, we see the boy already in the ring. The trainer is teaching you how to wrap his hands. Josh is angry because you doesn't even know how to wrap his hands by himself. The crowd is excited, asking for the fight to start soon. Someone asks if everything will be alright, and another comments on the protagonist's body, saying it looks like he has never set foot in a gym. A guy tells everyone never to underestimate someone the trainer brought in. In his thoughts, it reminds him of when the trainer first brought Aaron. Their talents were on a completely different level from his. He wonders what Josh will do when he sees there is an opponent he will never surpass. Kay says everything is ready and then asks if the protagonist is nervous. He says no, but questions why there are so many people gathered. Kay says this will be Yu's first boxing lesson, so from today until the end of Yu's career, he must not be hit even once. The boy agrees somewhat reluctantly. Kay says that is all the protagonist needs to know about the first lesson. The 2 are already in the ring and the trainer is very excited. The referee starts the match. Josh charges our boy with tremendous force. You just observes, calmly dodging. Again, he evades. None of the boys' punches are hitting you. Josh tries again, but the protagonist dodges. The crowd admires Josh for being so fast and having such sharp jabs. However, the trainer is in pure excitement. Everyone starts to realize that none of the boys' punches are landing on you. The same guy as before says the protagonist doesn't have power but speed, as he is easily dodging those relentless punches. He asks if you have seen Josh's punches in slow motion. The protagonist dodges again. Everyone says this is unbelievable. Josh is exhausted, saying it's impossible since he couldn't land a single punch. The boy realizes that when the trainer said he couldn't even scratch him, it wasn't a joke. He was serious. Josh sees a huge wall in front of him. He says he needs to calm down. At this exact moment, Josh says he will combine several attacks to make them less predictable. Even so, his effort continues to be in vain. He questions how this is possible, saying he is working harder than anyone for many years, trying to be a champion, but all his dedicated time seems worth nothing. The trainer says he knows how unfair it is because he knows Josh is a good boxer, his footwork and direct jabs along with his exhaustive training hours, but that's all the boy has. No matter how much Josh wants to deny it to himself, his effort can't surpass divine talent. The referee blows the whistle, saying the first round is over. Josh is exhausted, while the trainer says it's time to end this. Kay says now it's time for the second lesson. He says if you hit someone on the chin, they will pass out. In other words, you just needs to dodge and hit. The trainer asks if it's easy. Yu says yes, dodge well and punch well. A boxer works for years to perfect these two factors, but a genius is born with a natural ability to create his own style of movements. Yu's a prodigy, so just give him simple objectives instead of teaching mediocre moves. His existence is the very incarnation of boxing. Josh is angry seeing the trainer teach Yu what he doesn't care. The boy admits that Yu's reaction speed is amazing and adds that he has never seen such talent in his life. However, there's one thing talent can't do for him. Energy and endurance only come with effort. Josh says Yu seemed exhausted at the end of the first round. The boy says he lost a lot of energy getting nervous, but in the second round he will press Yu until he gets hit by his punches. The referee starts and Josh passes out. The referee wakes the boy, saying he is happy he woke up. Josh watches Kay walk away. The referee says it was a good try. Josh is sad, saying he now understands that Yu is on another level and understands the trainer's words that there is no fun in training someone with such obvious limits. The protagonist asks if Josh wants to go another round, but he says going further is too much and can even be considered humiliation. Yu tells him to do as he pleases. He is extremely frustrated. The boy says he has a question. Josh says that when the trainer visited the protagonist's country, he mentioned another person who is also strong, then asks if Yu knows who it is. Yu confirms, then asks if this other person is stronger than him. The protagonist remembers our brave one and says probably yes. Josh is sad and then lowers his head. The boy is left alone. We see a journalist talking about the latest boxer Kay is training. He says the lightweight matches this year will be exciting. A guy with glasses asks if the blonde found any scoop. The two talk about the first official match of the boxer Kay is training, and the blonde says it's hard to get information because the old man is very protective of his boxers. But this time, he managed to get a piece of information. He says the new guy has only been training endurance for the past 2 years. Our protagonist is running while remembering some boxing moves. Yu continues to run. Arriving home, he passes by his cat and goes straight to the bathroom to wet himself. We then see the boy's body. After that, at the gym, Carmen is introducing Yu's first opponent. She says his nickname is Rookie Killer and adds that he earned this nickname after defeating other rookies wanting to ascend to professional. His specialty is defeating amateur fighters using dirty tricks while fighting, but he is not a big threat if the fighter doesn't get caught by the dirty tricks. However, there is a concern that even though they trust the trainer's skill and insight as they always have, they believe Yu's weight reduction was excessive. Moreover, all they've done in the last 2 years is get Yu in shape and have him watch boxing matches, so they wonder if it will be okay. The trainer says this is a dilemma. Elsewhere, we see the so-called Rookie Killer training. The blonde from before is watching the training, commenting that the punch combinations are intense, and John's trainer says that's his main weapon. The guy says this is the big dirty trick. While using consecutive hooks, he ends up holding the opponent's head by accident, thus causing a knockout. Because it resembles a technique used by wrestlers, the spectators call it the guillotine hook. The massive power John has is the reason he has defeated several rookies. Someone catches the guy's attention. His trainer says it's a reporter, and he introduces himself as Peter. John gets excited. A while later, he is laughing, saying the opponent he will fight must be a big deal since even a reporter came to interview him. The guy wonders what kind of monster Kay has found this time. Peter laughs, saying it's for the newspaper, but personally he is interested in John's title as a rookie killer because it wouldn't be fun if this sport were predictable. John asks if the reporter knows a thing or two about the game. He says there are idiots making a fuss about how good someone's training was or how someone trained using some secret technique, and adds that he enjoys knocking out this type of person. Seeing their expressions after their dreams are crushed gives him an insane feeling. Calmly, Peter says he understands, then asks if John's style was born to provoke these idiots. John asks what the reporter is talking about, saying he is teaching them a lesson. Rules are meant to be broken. Even suffering some fouls, in the end, he just needs to knock out the opponent to end up victorious. Peter says he is a good citizen, which is why he follows the rules. John continues, saying those guys have chicken brains because guys who fight by the rules are weak and cowardly. When he breaks the rules, they get pissed as if he stole some candy and says that there are only 2 rules in this world. Either you are alive or you are dead. The reporter says any boxer would get mad at John's provocations, especially if it's in their debut. Peter says John's style reminds him of a certain boxer, then asks if he likes the middleweight world champion Fabrizio Santorino. John asks if the reporter didn't know, saying the Santorino brothers are true warriors on this battlefield and are on a completely different level. They know what a real battle should be, which is why they are the best. In his thoughts, Peter says the association chose someone very interesting for the debut and then asks the reporter to tell Mr. K and his apprentice that he will spit and devour him in the ring. Later, we observe John and his trainer on the roof. The old man asks how the interview went. He responds that it was just a bit provocative, but asks his trainer if he will really win. He tells John to have more confidence because you never know what can happen in the ring. John says he will keep that in mind and then put on a good show. The next day at the fight venue, Yu arrives with Kay while various reporters are saying that Yu really is a fast boxer. Everyone asks how the trainer found Yu or which category he is aiming for. Carmen says they are not accepting interviews until after the fight. Next door, John says there is a lot of noise in the other room, and his trainer asks if he is nervous. He responds that crushing the lives of rookies is the meaning of his existence. His trainer says that's the spirit. Someone arrives saying John is next. He gets up, saying it's showtime. The crowd cheers when they see John. Everyone says he is the rookie killer, but more like a king. The audience is in great excitement, which makes John even more excited. We are introduced to the commentators Peter Cullen and Bob Norris. Cullen says everyone is excited for the debut fight, and Bob says that's because it's the match of Kay's latest fighter in the ring. John says this will be a guaranteed show. He has never seen so many people for just one match, so he can't wait to see the look of disappointment. Cullen says Yu has arrived standing at 175 centimeters and weighing 61 kilograms, wrapped in a mysterious cloak. He wonders what Kay will show them. Kay looks at Yu and then asks him to step up. He looks and climbs up as the trainer asked, looking up and seeing the lights. Peter asks how the match will be for someone who has only trained endurance for 2 years. Someone in the background watches. The trainer tells John to keep a close-range fight to prevent the opponent from making quick movements. Kay tells Yu to do exactly what he asked, no more and no less. Cullen says the match will begin, asking if the big guy will finish off the opponent or if the young one will emerge victorious. John thinks Yu is too calm for a rookie. He wants to see if he will stay this calm after the fight starts. Everyone watches the fight begin. The referee starts the match. John says it's time for a welcome trot, but something happens. Someone like this awakened a fear in John that he had never felt before, making him tremble until he swallowed hard. A kind of fear he never thought he would experience, like a gun being pointed at him. Everyone talks around, some saying Yu will try to keep a long-range fight. John curses Yu in his mind. When he moves forward like a shot, a punch heads his way, blood spills from his cheek, and everyone is astonished. Kay just smiles. Going back to a few days before the fight, Carmen says she doesn't understand. Kay wonders how he will cook him to leave the audience in shock. Punches are aggressively thrown at John. The trainer prepared our boy to present himself to the audience, and even if there's a chance to finish, Yu is not to do it, to show the crowd who exactly Yu is. The audience is impressed. The other trainer asks what kind of monster he brought this time. John looks at the ground, saying he blacked out for a second. Then he sees blood. The referee blows the whistle to stop the fight. Cullen says that in quick movements, the protagonist turned John's face into a pool of blood. The physiotherapist pauses to check the wounds. In the ring, the doctor doesn't understand. The physiotherapist says that in 21 years of work, he has never seen movements like those. Seeing the situation, the referee asks if there's a problem. The man seeing that specifically the wound says punches or injuries only cause skin cracks, but unbelievably, those cuts are clean. Looking back, he asks how the boy did that with those gloves. Yu stands in an unshakable pose, while John is hallucinating, scared, his heart beating faster and faster. The doctor says there's nothing wrong, so John can continue the fight. Approaching him, the referee asks if John can fight. He says those were just scratches. The referee starts the match again. Bob says John is bleeding a lot, but it seems the wounds were not that serious. He says there's something wrong with the protagonist because he is different from any other boxer he has fought, not just because his skill is good. Boxing is a structured sport with rules where skills compete with skills. It's not like they are some kind of assassins, but he doesn't feel any kind of restriction from use punch. Memories of his youth flash before his eyes, and he remembers the most dangerous type he encountered, the one devoid of emotions. John stays alert, saying you is very dangerous. The guy tries to do something, but the boy lands a straight punch. John staggers back, spitting blood on the ground. John says he hit him and notices the boy is visibly far away. He asks if he was even human. In a moment, the protagonist is beside John. Seconds later, a punch is thrown. The audience sees it. John tries to do something, but Yu dodges and hits him continuously, non-stop. What the audience sees is only blood. His trainer realizes it's impossible for John to win. In fact, even he must have realized he can't win. He was making a toy out of him. Kay smiles. John asks what the boy's punches are. Where the blow comes, his guard is pierced instantly. Then he realizes Yu is not throwing any decisive punches on purpose. The protagonist lands a blow to his rib. John is in disbelief. In his mind, violence, the instinct to survive, blood, and violence resonate. There's nothing better than entertaining the audience. In the background, someone says Yu is the devil. He this time has outdone himself. The fun turned into ecstasy, the ecstasy of frenzied madness. Everyone is screaming, saying the trainer brought the devil himself. John says the protagonist is the kind of person who won't feel anything even after killing someone, so now he must try to limit his movements. Trying to play dirty, he attempts to step on Yu's foot, but Yu quickly dodges. John is astonished, but again he is surprised by another blow. He realizes the boy is reading even the movements of his feet. The crowd shouts, saying John tried to play dirty, calling him scum, and they demand that John just die. Yu throws a punch. The guy can't do anything anymore. Our boy hits him, landing several punches in succession. While the trainer says John still has a chance since Yu has dropped his guard and is within reach. John can grab him. No matter how good the reflexes are at that distance, he can't dodge, but unfortunately, the pressure from the crowd is overwhelming. John is exhausted, and his trainer asks him to pull himself together. More and more people are screaming, and John finds himself in a deep void. The trainer wonders in his mind if he is okay with this. In a flashback, we see that not everyone was born to be in the spotlight. 4 wins and 7 losses. With his ordinary skill, John didn't hit the jackpot. He was just someone disposable who had a few good hooks. His trainer arrives, asking if he is working hard again, and John greets him. He says the hooks aren't bad, but still have a long way to go. John says he is good at this thanks to him, and the old man says he lacks respect. The two stare at each other. John is angry because the old man said he still has a long way to go, and the trainer says his opponent has already been found. John gets excited, asking who it is, and his trainer responds that it is Isaac Dresner, a super elite athlete who has dominated several tournaments and is now trying to win the Olympic medal. John says he heard Isaac is trying to turn professional and then asks if he is in the same weight class. The trainer looks at him. John asks the old man not to make that face because he already knows he has no chance. He is practically being sacrificed for Isaac to make his debut. The old man lowers his head and apologizes, saying John would be better if he had more to offer. Smiling, John asks what he is talking about. Boxing is in his blood and in his head. He is the best, even if he isn't. If it weren't for boxing, he would be in the gutter right now. So he asks the old man not to apologize because he taught him a lot. Besides, punching the punching bag, John says it's not over until it's over. The trainer says those are wise words coming from a rookie, but anyway, he is still a rookie with a big mouth, and John complains. As expected, it was a one-sided battle. His trainer even tried to ask him to pull himself together, but he knew it was impossible to win. The guy keeps getting beaten, seeing in Isaac's eyes that he doesn't care about John. As expected from an elite athlete, John tries something, but the guy dodges, hitting him with a punch. John tries again, but Isaac counterattacks. Even getting beaten, John doesn't give up, but living for boxing for just one more day is enough. His life was always about stealing or being stolen from, betraying or being betrayed, attacking or being attacked. Everyone followed the wrong path, advancing through the wrong life. A predator eats another predator, a dark and chaotic world. His memory is the old man complaining to him. But it was there that, for the first time in his life, John saw the radiant glory of this world. Whether caught by luck or misfortune, his arm trapped the guy's neck. But he knew he couldn't stop now, so he punched him. Everyone is impressed, including himself. Knocked out, the referee blows the whistle. No one expected John to win. Somehow, Isaac got up again. The humiliation of suffering his first knockout gave John a miraculous victory. Later, on the roof, the old man asks what the association said. John says they overlooked the fouls and ask him to fight like he did today, and if he can stabilize, the association will arrange fights so he will make money. The trainer asks what John's response was to that. He replies that the world also needs villains. Now, at this moment, the crowd is shouting that justice was served, continuously demanding that he die. His trainer is frustrated. John doesn't know what to do. Cullen says this is a terrifying sight. Everyone tells the guy to try to do something. His trainer remembers that in the last interview, John said he admired Fabrizio. But he knows he would never admire that trash. The trainer says that at the end of every match, John suffers deeply in his room, yet the fouls cannot be justified, and John knows this better than anyone. If he decides to cheat again, the trainer will support him at any cost. No matter if others hate him, he will always be rooting for John. The guy continues to get beaten. His trainer says he will always recognize his talent. Hitting the ring floor, the old man shouts for John to give it his all to stay standing because he will always be by his side. John tries to fight back. He says he honestly envies him. Someone as talented as John would never need to worry about being sidelined. In fact, he would never be thrown out. He could even dominate the boxing world. But still, John's talent is second rate. People watch. Peter notices John will try to grab you. He says he will never retreat. The protagonist defends, the lights illuminating the ring, everyone watching in fear. John is confused. We see Yu delivered a devastating punch that fractured his opponent's bone. The guy steps back, yet the pain is overwhelming. Without any emotion, Yu finishes and John is knocked out. His trainer is astonished. Kay has an expression of absolute victory. The opponent kneels and then falls to the ground. The referee ends the match. The crowd screams, asking if John is dead. Cullen says Yu delivered a right that made the opponent collapse. The trainer asks John to get up. In his subconscious, the trainer says he should have stopped John back then. He wanted to tell him not to be a disposable boxer who just puts on a show, but unfortunately, those words never left his mouth. Because of his foolishness, the trainer did not have the skill to make John stronger, so he couldn't say a word, but he is sure that if it were that golden person, he would have managed to stop John. Almost crying, the trainer apologizes. On the ground, John asks why the old man is making that face again because he said before. The referee counts to end the round. John says the trainer taught him well. He realizes the guy got up. John adds that he learned a lot. The trainer is impressed, as is everyone present. The referee continues counting. John is almost standing. Yu does nothing. The referee continues the count. John says there is no reason for the old man to apologize because back then, he helped him a lot. John says he did something stupid again. What he really wanted was to be a boxer like him. In his last words, John apologizes. Finally, the referee blows the whistle, ending the match. Cullen says this is a horrible sight, a performance as merciless as a demon's, and then says that evil itself has just debuted in boxing. In the background, someone is watching. Everyone shouts and applauds, but he just walks away. Peter says the way you destroyed that guillotine hook was shocking. A short punch, literally a supernatural technique. Moreover, it was impressive that the protagonist used a hook to stop another hook, but only John received damage. Probably you aimed precisely at a weak spot. The boy's quick reaction goes beyond human limits. Looking at Kay, the man says he found the most powerful monster of all. Smiling, he says this is very interesting, a rookie who played with a rookie killer. First, it was Qasim, but now it's you. He adds that he can already feel the excitement of the strongest boxers, the appearance of a giant destined to produce waves big and small that will affect everyone around. A guy says you was incredible. He asks Josh if he didn't like the fight. He says he was just thinking about some things. Josh kind of feels relieved. What he always had was never an achievable dream. Josh tells his uncle he will do his best in his bartending show. After that, we see some people were disappointed. Sometime later at the gym, we see Chil saying he wished the rookie killer had won. He asks Jay if that is the friend he talked about. He says yes. The boy says Yu is ridiculously strong. Jay looks at the protagonist and gets very excited. In his mind, he says he knew Yu had something more. Chil tells Jay not to get too excited because the protagonist is living in a world totally different from his. The boy says he knows, but when they meet, he wants Yu to be proud of him. Then he starts jumping rope much faster than before. Chil watches in awe. Jay shouts that he can do this. He says this is not bad. The boy shouts louder, saying he can do this. Chil says this is amazing. The two start jumping rope extremely fast. Next to them, the master asks what's happening with them. Elsewhere, we see someone watching Yu's fight, saying it looks great. Behind him are several security guards. He asks if the man can beat him. Someone arrives saying Sumi's men are there. He says he's going and Big follows. The boy looks at the TV and then gets angry, feeling a deadly hatred. People scream. We see a man beaten up. The guy says the boy did a good job. Around him, several opponents are on the ground with bloody fists. We observe that Back feels slightly envious. Near where the tournament took place, a blonde man is happy. He asks Gene what he thought of the new fighter from Trainer K. The guy stops. Gene remembers the protagonist's punches. The man calls his attention. Gene says something. He says he is in love with Yu, and this Gene is the lightweight division champion, Jean-Pierre Manuel. In a dark place, someone is eating pizza and drinking beer. We see that another person is watching Yu's fight, saying that's the guy. He says he thought it was someone worthy. Guys like the protagonist are worth 12. Suddenly, he shouts that this year's lightweight rookie is him. Another day, we see Peter saying that the lightweight division will be the most famous this year. Yu left a strong impression on all the fans. But as if that wasn't enough, another lightweight division fighter also had an extraordinary debut, Qasim Al-Jahad, the grandson of the president of the Jahad Group conglomerate. Just by appearing in boxing, he caused several rumors, but his frightening performance left everyone in shock. Yu versus Kosum, and there is no boxing fan who isn't excited for a fight between these two. The winner of this fight would be recognized to compete for the lightweight belt held by Jean, who has been undefeated for 10 years. Peter says he can't wait. Someone kicks the door. Everyone around looks. We see the silhouette of someone. Kosum shouts that he is back. He has a clear smile and then asks how the trainer has been all this time. He looks at it and says that the guy had disappeared for 2 months, and when he returns, he is in a pitiful state. Kosum asks him to stop the nonsense. His trainer doesn't understand. The guy says that all this rest made him eager for a fight. Kosum asks Sebastian to arrange the victims and says he will pay 10,000 for each attack with bundles of money. He asks the people in the back to come and fight. The trainer remembers that when he first saw him in the gym, he almost kneeled. He asked if he was seeing things but attended to him normally as if he were a client who wanted to learn boxing as a hobby. He had said he had lost interest in things that could be bought with money, so all he wants now is the belt and the champion title. He thought the guy was just a bit excited, so he sent him a session of fights to go home, but the result was scary. A mere rookie defeated several professionals. Kosum may have gained some weight, but his style hasn't changed. He asks someone to get in the ring. Another guy steps up. His trainer says that even after seeing it several times, he still can't believe his eyes. It's displeasing, but it's his style. Everything is a game, and boxing for him is just another game to finish. Even so, Kosum is formidable. Another guy appears. The trainer says his style irritates him. They stare at each other. His opponent tries something, but Kosum easily dodges and quickly counterattacks. The guy asks what was the point of perfecting his techniques. He wonders what kind of movements those are. He left his defense completely open and throws random punches. The fat guy hammers the little guy. His trainer shouts for Kosum not to use his joints, as that would be a foul. He says he forgot. He asks Sebastian if he can buy the boxing association and change the rules. The trainer says it irritates him, but still he has that an unparalleled talent that others don't have. We see Kosum punch the guy again. We see the opponent now lying on the ground. Even with his clumsy style, the trainer says that makes 20 people. Anyway, Kosum is immeasurably strong. Without any training, he is stronger than others who train their whole lives, a strength that was gifted to him when he was born. 2 weeks have passed and Kosum is still fighting. He lands another blow on one of his opponents, who becomes dazed from the hit and falls face first onto the mat at Kosum's feet. He asks Sebastian, how many are left? Exactly 1,000, sir, replies the butler. Kosum says it's been refreshing. The trainer comments that he's crazy that anyone else would have run out the front door screaming and thinks he would like others to practice with him. He adds that Kosum was obese 2 weeks ago, but now he's back to his normal weight, having burned off all his body fat and developed a defined abdomen. No amount of training tires him because he finds it enjoyable and treats boxing like a game. He eats like a glutton and sleeps whenever he wants as if he were the king of beasts. His physical skill and the amount of practice he puts in seem limitless, and his wild nature makes it hard to believe he's human. The trainer can't imagine him losing to anyone and believes Kosum will be the fighter who becomes the lightweight champion. We see a kettle on the stove and some picture frames on the shelf. A boy sits at the table looking sad. His father, noticing his expression, realizes it's because of the food. He tells his son they've only been eating potato soup lately, and that it must be getting tiresome. But the boy says he loves potato soup. The father promises to buy something better if he wins the prize in the next fight, and the boy is happy to hear this. He feels pleased to have cheered up his son, but thinks he'll first need to pay the overdue rent, utilities, and water bills. After setting aside money for food, there's still gas to consider. Maybe he can buy a chicken with what's left over or a steak if he gets a victory bonus. He concludes that such a bonus would be very nice. But he thinks that you never know what will happen in boxing. The scene cuts to outside the fight venue, where someone is panicking because Kosum isn't there as the fight will take place the following day. However, someone bursts in, kicking the door open and surprising everyone present. It's Qasim Al-Jahad in the flesh. He asks if the person called Yu is among the common folk and remarks that he's been so kind to grace them with his presence but dares to make him wait, demanding that they summon him immediately. Some people wonder if Qasim Al-Jahad is really there, and if it's the first time they've seen him in person. The trainer appears and asks what's going on. One of his students replies that Kosum is causing a commotion. The trainer is surprised when he notices Kosum's presence. Kosum sees him and recognizes him as the trainer K, saying he came in person to visit Yu. But as soon as he finishes speaking, the trainer grabs him by the legs. Kosum asks what he's doing, calling him an old madman. But K realizes that Kosum is an excellent specimen. His body is perfectly balanced with strong, lean muscles compared to those of a wild stallion, and of course, compared to him, he's just a baby pony. K concludes that Kosum will make a good story, and that it won't be easy to find someone so well sculpted, as he's defined like a beast. K wonders if he'll enjoy watching Kosum being destroyed. Then K asks if Kosum is here to see Yu. Kosum replies that he is and assumes they will face each other before becoming world champions, so he was generous enough to come to see Yu. Trainer K responds that Yu is out for his morning run and that if Kosum runs now, he might catch up with him. Excellent, says Kosum. Outside, we see Yu hooded. He's running just as the trainer said. However, he hears something approaching. Kozum interrupts his run trying to land a punch on Yu, but Yu quickly dodges. Yu shows no surprise and simply stares at the man with a dark look. Kozum comments that Yu looks darker in person and asks if he finds it fun to box with such a depressive face. Yu remains still and calm, saying nothing. Kozum answers his own question, saying of course he doesn't. He turns around with a Machiavellian smile and says Yu should remember that people like him will never defeat him. After that, he runs off, shouting that the champion's belt is rightfully his. The protagonist stands there, not fully understanding what just happened. Later, we see the fight gym completely packed. Kozum is about to attack his opponent. James looks at him and says he knew it would be difficult, but compares his opponent to a wild beast. From Kozum's expression, he truly looks like an untamed beast. James attempts to land a punch, but his opponent dodges, ready to counterattack. He notices that the opponent is about to use a hook, but Kozum delivers a double punch, trying to land 2 hits simultaneously. James, surprised, can't believe what just happened, but it seems like Kozum wanted exactly that reaction from him. James calls him crazy and prepares for the attack. He assumes a defensive stance, but Kozum is ready to strike. Even though James isn't leaving himself open, he still feels the blow, and his opponent prepares to attack again. But Kozum, observing the fight, wonders why his opponents are so serious about boxing, thinking that boxing is just a simple game and that they should just loosen up and have some fun. James, on the contrary, doesn't seem to be enjoying himself. He just took a precise hit from his opponent, which seems to have struck him directly, sending him down to his knees. The fight commentator says it's an unbelievable way to knock someone out. Kozum forced his opponent to his knees with just sheer physical strength. Kozum remarks that the real loser is the opponent, who can't enjoy himself. Trainer K watches the fight with some colleagues and confirms that Kozum is indeed someone very interesting. He notes that Kozum might think he's attacking 2 places at once, but there's a reason boxers don't use such ridiculous moves. The power of a punch comes from the bottom, generated by the flow of energy from the legs to the core and delivered through the arms. But a position like that breaks the flow and makes it impossible for him to strengthen his punches, leaving him open to attacks, rendering that move pointless. However, his physical skill is another story. It allows him to channel his strength into punches that are out of the ordinary, turning a weak punch into one with high accuracy. His incredible beast-like athletic ability makes the impossible become reality, concludes K. We finally return to the fight, where James has gotten up and still has some strength left in him. Kozum says it's time to end this and slides with his feet, preparing to attack. James wonders what Kozum will pull out this time, and notices that the distance between them is too great for the opponent to land a punch and knock him out. But with his crazy physical skills, it might be possible. James thinks that his only chance to win is now and plans to use a counterattack when the opponent throws his punch with full force. The stronger the opponent attacks, the harder it will be for him to be hit by the counterattack. It's beastly moves against boxing techniques. Who will win this fight? Kozum charges in to attack, and so does James. Both want to win the match and are giving their all. But when James tries to use his counterattack, he misses, and is startled because he was confident he would succeed. However, his slip-up proves costly, and something serious happens. He is hit by his opponent and is thrown into the ropes of the ring. His eyes are completely white and his mouth is bleeding. His knees are keeping him propped up on the ground, but soon after, he falls completely. The commentator says the knockout was incredible, and Kozum has his fist in the air as if he's certain of his victory. In the background, we hear the fight count. Kozum is exuberant about his imminent victory, celebrating and calling himself all-powerful, but he looks to the side as something catches his attention. His opponent is getting up before the count is finished. His expression changes to something quite unpleasant. James refuses to lose the fight. He thinks of his son and the promise he made and tells his opponent not to take boxing lightly. His voice is weak, but he tries to continue. But his strength is completely exhausted and he falls permanently to the ground of the ring. Kozum scoffs and asks why he should listen to advice from a loser who doesn't know how to have fun. An opponent in the ring looks extremely scared, wondering what he's fighting against. On the other side is the protagonist with his dark gaze. His opponent is not at all comfortable fighting him, but Yu doesn't change his stance and is ready to fight. With just one punch, he has his arm raised by the referee and wins the fight. His face shows no emotion as usual. On the other hand, Kozum is also fighting and having fun. His opponent admires his athletic ability and can't believe what he's doing in the ring, comparing him to an animal. The fight between the two doesn't last long, with Kozum landing a knockout on his opponent and easily winning the match. With both arms raised, he celebrates his victory, proclaiming that it's undeniable he's the winner. As expected, Yu and Kozum quickly cause a stir in the lightweight division, with both rapidly becoming the best in the world. The protagonist enters the ring with clean, clear, and intimidating movements, while Kozum dominates his opponents with his unique, unconventional punches and an animalistic instinct. But who will make the first move? In the post-fight interview, an interviewer praises Kozum's performance and asks what he thinks of the match result. Kozum starts by energizing the crowd and asking if they enjoyed the show. Then he gets straight to the point, saying he wants the belt and will soon achieve it. But first, he has someone else to deal with. He threatens to crush you and then declares that he will take what is rightfully his, the title of the best in the world. He tells everyone to say goodbye to old boxing practices because Qasim Al-Jahad is here to usher in a new era. As expected, Qasim was the first to make a move. Trainer K listens to the interview and struggles to hold back his laughter, but he can't resist and bursts into loud laughter, annoying everyone in the room around him. While Qasim is laughing on TV, K is laughing in his office and he sarcastically says he'll have to give the enemy the best fight of his life. Qasim leaves the ring and is escorted to the locker room. His trainer thinks that his post-fight statement was as bold as his personality. The trainer didn't like him at first, but now he's dancing to his tune. Qasim has been leading him by the nose before he even realized it. His charisma influences everything and everyone around him, just like his boxing style. The entire audience shouts his name in the fight's farewell. Qasim has made a mark in the boxing scene, splitting fans into two groups. One group passionately supporting him, saying he has created a new boxing style that rejects current techniques, and another skeptical group criticizing him as a circus act that won't hold up against a real opponent. An expert defends that modern techniques are optimized based on fighters' experiences over time, but Qasim's style, while entertaining, is limited. Another commentator disagrees, saying this mindset shows someone stuck in the past and that it's high time for an evolution in the sport. Just as everything in life evolves, so does boxing. This is the moment all fight fans have been waiting for, and in other words, the outdated cannot stop progress. Surrounded by opposing opinions, Qasim, without hesitation, continued advancing and at his own pace defeated the more orthodox fighters, proving his strength, until gradually the opposition dwindled and became a disregarded minority. Qasim is openly paving the way in boxing. His trainer admires him and recognizes his potential and knows he was born to rise to the throne and proclaim himself king. On the other side of the story, we see you training with a punching bag. His trainer says he's been challenged, and the challenger is someone he's encountered before. Qasim Al-Jahad, the same person who confronted him during his run. This guy will be a bit different from the fodder the protagonist has been knocking out so far. He, as always, shows no reaction upon hearing this. Quickly, the day of the match arrives. The commentator announces that this is the main event everyone has been waiting for. Qasim versus you, a lightweight bout that has turned the division upside down, will begin. It can be said that this fight will determine who is closest to claiming the lightweight throne. Jean-Pierre, the lightweight champion, is in the audience. He came personally to watch the fight. Qasim's trainer mentions this to him and says that he's also worried about the outcome of this fight, adding that the chance to capture the championship belt Qasim has always wanted is just around the corner. He just needs to win this one and then face the champion. Qasim, in turn, asks the trainer if he thinks a mere belt will satisfy him, and then says he wants something greater than that. He aims to hold all the titles in every division and conquer the boxing world. The trainer thinks, as expected, this is the real deal, and he is eager to see how far he can go. The champion also seems interested in what will happen, but he has a vacant look similar to the protagonists. Yu is already in the ring with his trainer, who asks if he remembers what was said before, and Yu implies that he doesn't. Good, says the trainer, and with that, he exits the ring. The long-awaited match. Both boxers are ready to begin. Qasim, the unconventional fighter, comes armed with fierce intensity, while Yu, the boxing genius, approaches with a quiet and prepared demeanor. Who will be the victor in the most anticipated lightweight match of the year? The referee signals for the fight to begin. The excited commentator announces that it's time for the show to start. Qasim begins to move his feet, circling the ring with his unique beast-like gait. With his beastly gaze, he locks eyes with his opponent. Who will be the first to make a move and end this suspense? Qasim recalls his first encounter with the protagonist and notes that it was a casual meeting, a bit of what was to come. He then clasps his hands behind his back and says that now is the time for real fun, inviting his opponent to strike him. All other fighters can only use horizontal punches or cross punches from a certain distance, he says, referring to himself as the power that no one can defeat since everyone else is so formal and proper, unlike him, whom he considers more modern and creative because he views everything as a fun game. He moves his feet again, but just when he least expects it, an opponent's punch catches him off guard. His trainer is shocked by this, while Yu's trainer is extremely pleased. Qasim Al-Jahad, who seemed untouchable, took a precise and unexpected blow. We see a flashback from before the fight when Ki warned the protagonist that his opponent was different from the others, and the protagonist, although still, listened to what was said. Kay says that so far, Yu has had to hold back against his opponents to put on a good show for the audience, but this guy is strong enough that Yu doesn't need to worry about that. He tells Yu not to hold back. On the floor, we see a mound of sand that fell from the punching bag through the hole the protagonist left while training for his big fight. In another moment, we see a trainer helping an athlete with sit-ups as he struggles and is almost completing the exercise. Another is exercising with weights and is putting in a lot of effort. The gym they're in seems to be packed. Others are practicing boxing, and the trainer tells one of them to use the backhand guard. Some are training the punching bags, punching and dodging. Others are stretching ropes to strengthen their punches. While some fall, others get up. And even running is part of the exercise routine. The scene then cuts to Qasim's face, which is terrified. He's about to take a punch from his opponent, which, though fast, Qasim's reflexes allow him to see coming. When the punch lands, it's powerful and spreads blood across his face. He panics and cries out in pain. Trainer K smiles as he watches the fight. He was expecting something like this to happen. According to him, there are only two types of people in the world who can dodge such a punch. Someone who lives in a world where time moves at a different speed, and someone with wild instincts. But even with animalistic instincts, it's a miracle to dodge some punches, as it's practically impossible to avoid them all. So the body instinctively focuses on minimizing the damage, resulting in excruciating pain in exchange for not being knocked out. Thus, the boxer must sacrifice another part of the body to absorb the impact and protect the chin. However, even if the vital points are protected, strong and precise punches to the body will naturally break through the defense. Qasim's body is managing to absorb most of the damage. Qasim says that the protagonist's hands are the heaviest he's ever seen, as if they were sandbags. He is extremely frightened because he doesn't know how to react. Yu, on the other hand, is focused and ready for more, landing a punch to the opponent's abdomen, causing him to freeze with the impact. Another punch from Yu follows in quick succession, and he lands another hit on the opponent, who is unable to react and can only scream in pain. The commentator says that Yu landed 2 consecutive body blows, and with that, another side of Qasim is revealed. His trainer realizes that he is now the prey and not the hunter, and never imagined the gap between them would be so large. Looking at Kay, he says he's an old sly fox. Kay, in turn, is simply satisfied to see Yu's opponent getting beaten badly. Qasim is about to hit the canvas. His emotions are completely shattered. He wonders what he's doing there. His opponent stands tall in front of him, staring at him with his dark gaze. Qasim wonders why he is fighting someone like Yu, and why everyone in the audience is applauding him. Is this fun for you? He asks, and the audience's happy faces at seeing him lose are evident, which deeply shocks him, to the point where he feels he needs to escape the fight. Yu, meanwhile, remains calm as always and focused on the fight. Qasim's trainer is surprised and irritated by his current behavior. Qasim retreats, trying to flee from his opponent, while Kay stands outside, laughing at the current state of the fight. Trying to revive Qasim, his trainer asks what he's doing going to the corner of the ring, and tells him to raise his guard, but Qasim is so confused that he barely knows how to react. He tries to lift his guard as instructed, but it's not enough to prevent the next blow from his opponent. He's hit again, nearly losing consciousness. His trainer is stunned by the opponent's strength, and at this point no longer believes in his athlete's certain victory, thinking he hasn't taught him anything. Qasim wonders what he's supposed to do since he's never been in such a situation before. He tries to attack the opponent but fails. Yu, on the other hand, doesn't stay idle and lands a punch right to the opponent's face. Qasim even spits out his mouthguard involuntarily from the punch, and is stunned in every sense by this blow. His trainer blames himself for the outcome, calling himself a big fool. Naively, he clung to the idea that they were inaugurating a new era of boxing by reforming things but forgot to teach his athlete the basics. This makes him consider throwing in the towel and ending the fight, but he thinks it's not the right time since Qasim hasn't been knocked out yet. He says they haven't shown everything they have to their opponents yet and believes that once you're in the ring, you should give it everything you've got. He shouts at Qasim to hang on until the end of the first round, and then he'll provide the next strategy. However, he looks at the ring and is surprised by what he sees. The protagonist stands still, watching the scene, and even the referee is stunned by what is happening. Kay, for his part, also watches joyfully. Qasim can't take it anymore and surprises everyone by trying to jump out of the ring. His trainer looks at him furiously, unable to believe he's behaving this way. The commentator also can't believe he's seen Qasim trying to escape the ring. This unpredictable situation has left the audience and the referee in shock. Qasim is reprimanded by his trainer, who scolds him for trying to flee the fight. But he doesn't care and just tells them to get out of his way. He says the trainer doesn't know what it's like to face you, and that he's not crazy enough to keep fighting him. With that, he says that everyone else is crazy, but he's out. The trainer, in shock, definitely didn't expect such a reaction from him, and then asks Qasim if he really thinks boxing is just a mere game. Then he slaps him in the face. Furious, he shouts that yes, the opponent is stronger. Maybe he's the strongest in the lightweight division or even in the whole world of boxing. But then Qasim asks what he's doing there. The trainer asks it if he really thought he would only fight weaker opponents and says that no matter how strong the opponent is, he must give his best. All fighters shed blood, sweat, and tears while training to step into the ring and fight. Qasim is impacted by these words from his trainer, but still believes his previous intentions were true. He remembers that he had scorned his opponent in the last fight, saying that the advice of an old loser was worthless to him, and that his intentions were just to have fun. But now everyone is watching him, and he wonders if that really was his goal. He also recalls that he heard earlier that boxing is not just a game. With that, he breaks down in tears. Crying, he runs away from the fight scene. The audience reacts, which makes him cry even more. Seeing this, his trainer blames himself for ever letting him step into the ring. But due to the opponent's withdrawal, the bell rings, and the referee declares Yu the winner of the fight. Thus, the much-anticipated clash between the two rookie prodigies ended in an unbelievable way, with Yu winning in 1 minute and 32 seconds. Trainer K laughs heartily at the opponent's swift retreat. After this match, no one saw Qasim Al-Jahad step into the ring again. The scene shifts to James's kettle on the stove. The door opens, and the bell rings. The boy notices someone has entered the house and is holding a bag of chicken. James, injured but happy, sees his son, who is also happy to see him. The boy enthusiastically smiles. The protagonist is in fighting stance, his opponent staring at him with a shining gaze. He says Yu is trembling with fear against the mysterious cat boxer, as if Yu had never had a chance against this wild hunter, the Cat King. The cat prepares to attack the protagonist, and a fierce battle ensues with very fast exchanges of punches. Yu gracefully dodges all the attacks coming his way. The cat also has sharp reflexes. Trainer K rejoices, laughing. The cat's eyes shine, while the protagonist remains static. But with a brief slip, the cat lands a blow, and Yu is surprised by it. However, we see that all of this was just a dream, and Yu is awakened by his cat in real life. He says that as a professional fighter, one must know how to handle their own body. At least that's what he usually tells his students. Since the protagonist seems to know exactly what he's doing, this no longer applies to him after his last fight. However, there is still the possibility that his body has accumulated some stress, so he recommends Yu take it easy. He praises Yu's performance in his last fight and says he should rest a bit, not wanting to see him in the gym until the day after tomorrow. The sun shines in the sky. The outside of the protagonist's house looks peaceful. His clock shows the time as usual, and he, as always, pets his pet cat while watching something on TV. The expert from before asked another if he still thinks he is stuck in old habits, and reminds him that he warned that experience cannot be defeated. But the protagonist changes the channel to a news story about a giant penguin found on the beach. He changes again, this time to a horror movie, but it doesn't interest him. On the next channel, a soap opera is playing, but he switches to another channel showing an anime. Nothing pleases him, and he remains bored. On his clock, only a few minutes have passed. He recalls the time when a friend bought a new game and invited him to play at his house. With that, he thinks about it. His cat, apparently sleepy, is about to doze off on his lap. The scene cuts to outside a game store. An elderly man in his 50s says it has been 30 years since he founded his Tabletop Hockey Association. People laughed and said he was wasting his time doing something. But now he finally found what he was looking for. As he plays with his opponent, he concludes that he has finally found the genius who will lead the revolution in tabletop hockey. On the other side of the table is the protagonist who doesn't quite understand what the man said. The old man continues, saying he has the potential to be the best in the world at tabletop hockey and invites him to join him in changing the sport's direction worldwide. But Yu declines the offer, and the old man questions why. He says he doesn't have any hospital bills to pay or anything like that, so he says goodbye and leaves the place. The old man is Indiana Jackson, president of the Tabletop Hockey Association, and at the peak of his age, he was heartbroken. The protagonist moves on to another game and tries to learn how to play. It appears to be a music game, and he manages to score a perfect score. Some who observed say the protagonist achieved the highest score in the game's hardest song, wondering if he was some sort of game professional. After that, he moves on to a fighting game, and apparently performs very poorly. His opponent in the game is surprised by his performance and comments that his moves are like those of a beginner because he doesn't know any combos and everything he does is the classic one too. But he wonders how the protagonist is blocking his attacks and considers the possibility that he might be using some kind of hack, even though it's just an arcade game. A few hours have passed since the protagonist arrived there. He barely played and is already bored with the pastime. The end of the day arrives and the sun's about to set. The protagonist sits on a park bench gazing at the horizon. He observes people passing by and sees a couple with their child. He doesn't show any reaction and just keeps watching the leaves falling from the trees until someone approaches him and calls his attention. A boy with a smiling face and a radiant look stares at him, seemingly recognizing him from somewhere. The protagonist notices his presence, and the boy asks if he is the boxer he saw on TV. He simply remains silent and does not respond, but the boy insists he saw him boxing and asks for an autograph. The protagonist replies that he doesn't have one. The boy asks him to make one. He thinks about it for a moment, and then takes a notebook and signs his name in a very simple way. That was enough to please the boy. He says Yu is really strong, and so is the red-headed guy, and then tries to narrate the fight according to his childish perception. This manages to irritate the protagonist. The boy asks if Yu will face the champion soon, and he replies that maybe. The boy gets excited because the champion is strong too, but he thinks Yu will win the fight. Does that mean he'll be the strongest? The boy asks. Maybe. The protagonist replies with no enthusiasm. Upon hearing this, the boy says he wants to be strong like Yu, but Yu responds that there's nothing good about being strong. and that it doesn't matter how well you fight if you die when someone shoots you in the head. The boy is shocked to hear this, but Yu continues, saying a car can also kill if it hits someone, and a painful death can also happen if you encounter a lion or a tiger in the jungle. With a determined look, the boy stares at him and says he wants to become strong enough to defeat a lion or a tiger, but the protagonist cuts him off and says you could still die from a disease. And even if you're lucky and don't get a disease, you will still die like everyone else when your time comes. He tells the boy that his mother and father will die, and that he will also die someday, and even before that time comes, people can choose to commit suicide if they're tired of living. With that, he concludes that there's nothing good about being strong. The boy's face turns tearful, and the protagonist looks at him mildly. The boy then simply runs away crying, but this doesn't affect the protagonist in any way. The streetlights turn on and night falls. Yu, hooded, still remains there. He walks a bit on the sidewalk. Another boy appears in the same place as him, and as Yu walks, the boy follows him. Later, we see the entrance to Yu's garage. He enters his house and is warmly greeted by his cat. With his usual somber look, he greets the animal and says he hopes it lives for a long time. The sky is well studded with stars at night. A boy seems to be sleeping inside the garage, and Yu sleeps in his bed next to his cat. Elsewhere, we see only a heartbeat. Outside, the champion is slowly opening his eyes. After finishing his meditation while sitting in the ring, Jin, the champion, has a sad look. He is sitting at the table, ready to eat, but his wife looks at him furiously. She notices his expression and sees that he's not eating, so she asks if the reason is that he doesn't like her food. Still, he gives no answer or reaction. The woman remains angry, glaring at him, but Jin just stares at her, and seeing her only thinks about his future opponent and can't even pay attention to what his wife is saying. In another place, we see a secretary working, typing on her computer, and after working, she stretches a bit. But then she gets up and, looking out the window, sees a man jumping rope. It was Yu training. The secretary notices that he's there again, and that other boxers would normally use this time to rest. But she thinks the protagonist really doesn't need it, though she thinks he should at least take a day to rest. In the same training routine day after day, and he does it without fail. This is because he is a professional boxer despite everything. Even so, sometimes he wonders if he was some kind of robot. For over 2 years, he has always had the same empty expression, never making any friends. He's always practicing completely alone, training according to his coach's instructions. The secretary, seeing the protagonist in this state, notices that he doesn't seem genuinely interested in boxing. But does he really like anything to begin with? She wonders, and thinks that maybe he likes his cat. His next opponent will likely be the lightweight division champion. Thinking about it, they share similar vibes. She continues drinking her coffee and observing him, but concludes that Yu is a bit more, something she can't quite describe. Even if he wins the title, while she thinks this, Yu just stares blankly ahead. The secretary concludes that she can't imagine him being happy. The scene cuts back to the champion with his eyes closed. He is meditating in the middle of the ring. His coach is watching him, and notices that Jin has been meditating for longer lately. Trying to think of the reason, he concludes it might be to better prepare for his opponent. The coach asks Jin about his condition for the fight the next day. Jin simply replies that it's excellent, but excellent isn't good enough. The coach suggests they do one final test. Jin keeps insisting that being excellent is not enough, and that he needs to be better than excellent. In another location at the protagonist's gym entrance, his coach tells him to pay close attention to his opponent's last fight. The announcer introduces the event and says the match will start in a few minutes. The title fight between the number 1 in the world division, Till Schneider, and the lightweight world champion, Jean-Pierre Manuel. The protagonist watches the fight with his usual expression. The coach says that currently there are 5 top fighters in the pound-for-pound rankings worldwide. Junior welterweight, Yuto Takeda. Middleweight, Fabrizio Santorino. Junior heavyweight, Victor Grigorievich. Heavyweight, Aaron Tide. And finally, the protagonist's next opponent, lightweight, Jean-Pierre Manuel, winner of 37 fights and 31 by knockout, a genius who became champion without losing a fight in 10 years. Among the 5 mentioned, Jin is the best in terms of boxing technique perfection, and the coach warns the protagonist to observe how well-aligned his punches are. He moves his fists at the opponent's eye level, blocking their line of sight and sense of distance. Jean-Pierre can see his opponent very well from his position, but his opponent cannot. Jin's long reach and powerful movements are major obstacles. All he needs to do is position his extended fist in the right place, and he'll control the other fighter. His total reach is an incredible 2 meters. The protagonist doesn't react to this, but the coach mentions that this is 15 centimeters more than his own reach, which averages 173. So 2 meters is a devastating number. But technically, his reach is not just 2 meters. In the video, Jin moves very quickly. His feet never stay in one place. With this, he strikes his opponent with great force and precision. The coach draws the protagonist's attention to the speed of the jabs and the great distance when he moves back and forth. The perceived reach of his jabs exceeds 3 meters. He asks Yu if he knows what this means. Jin's look is very similar to Yu's, and he replies that it means no fighter can escape his reach throughout the entire fight. from start to finish. The kinetic energy generated by his incredible speed and long arms makes the power in his jabs equivalent to blades. Almost imagining how the match is from the opponent's point of view. The opponent faces Jean-Pierre, but he behaves like a fencer. When attacking, it's as if his arm is a sword ready to cut the adversary, and his punches are so constant they seem to come from all directions. The opponent notices the force of the blows and thinks they're more oppressive than he imagined, but he doesn't just sit idle. Jean remains static, waiting to be attacked. His opponent moves toward him to strike, but he fails to land a punch. He defends the attacks launched, but warns that he knows Jean will use his crab defense to block the punches, so he tries to land a right cross. But Jean wouldn't be the champion if all he had was his reach, and by observing closely, we see how he defends against the opponent's punch. And then he immediately counterattacks, landing a solid hit. The opponent reacts with a cry of pain. Jean moves his feet quickly and strikes him again with force. He used a shoulder roll to deflect the punch, then switched to a southpaw stance and slipped sideways before delivering a right hand to his opponent. That was a perfect decision, says Kay. Only 2 boxers in the world have reached this level of technique close to perfection in such a short time. One of them is Jean-Pierre Manuel, and the other is the protagonist. But he has another weapon besides his reach, which Yu does not have. What is the other fighter seeing at this moment? Jean's right fist is now being completely oppressive, indicating that the timing and positioning of his movements have changed. The complete switch to southpaw has completely confused his opponent, who can no longer gauge the timing and distance. Jean's opponent tries to guess his movements, but fails, taking a right jab in the process. Then, when it seems like his opponent is adjusting, Jean switches back to an orthodox stance. Jean-Pierre is an ambidextrous boxer who skillfully and almost perfectly uses both the orthodox and southpaw stances. His opponent is extremely confused by this and feels completely lost, unable to gauge timing or distance. What he is doing is instilling desperation in his opponent, keeping him in the dark. All the opponent can do is stand there, desperate and completely blind, knowing he is being annihilated. Jean's technique controls time and space in the ring. He lands every blow and wins the fight. As always, his performance was flawless from start to finish. The coach asks if the protagonist understands that perfection in technique is what he's after. Long distance and short distance, orthodox and southpaw, timing, speed, rhythm, control, and psychological warfare, all aspects are close to perfection. The announcer declares Jean the undisputed champion. As expected, the fight was entirely in his favor, and he is asked how he feels about the fight he had. Jean replies that he is not satisfied. The timing between his steps and the coordination of his weight distribution failed several times according to himself. But he promises to improve in the next fight, and says that if he makes the same mistakes, it will cost him his belt. The announcer asks which fight he is referring to. He responds that the question is quite obvious. The fight against Yu, number 3 in the world rankings, and says he is eagerly looking forward to fighting him. Coach K laughs upon hearing this. He says that Kosin was a big fish in a small pond, and that guys like him are small notes, but Jean is different. He is not content where he is because he is a true boxer, carefully honing his skills in an effort to reach the pinnacle of boxing technique. He also says that he understands Jean's talent and is amazed by his obsession with perfection, which makes him even more eager to see Jean's fight with the protagonist. Jean is standing, observing something. He notices how his opponent moves. The internal muscles are visible to him, even the arm movement when throwing a punch. Yu lands a punch on Qasim, and Jean watches the fight, absorbing everything about his next opponent. He sees Yu's guard and observes the force he used when attacking Qasim. When the fight ends, he hears the bell ring, and also hears the announcer announce the unbelievable result of Qasim being disqualified after fleeing the ring, giving Yu the victory by TKO in 1 minute and 32 seconds. The protagonist's calm expression intrigues him. It seems that somehow Jean identifies with him, even finding the fight's outcome beautiful. Jean is lost in his thoughts, and doesn't notice that while serving his own coffee, he's spilling it outside the cup. His wife doesn't understand what's going on in his head. She tries to call him by name, but is ignored. So she calls him again, this time shouting. With a shout, he snaps back to reality, realizing his mistake with the coffee. The woman asks what's wrong with him, noting that he's been sulking lately, but he doesn't respond. She insists that he's lost in his thoughts about boxing again. His gaze remains lost and vacant. The wife says it's always the same with him, that Jean always seems to be elsewhere when he's with her, wondering if he no longer cares about her, and if he still truly loves her. Jean simply responds that it's irritating. The woman is surprised by the response. He continues saying that her incessant chatter annoys him. Sometime later, an interview with Jean-Pierre takes place. The interviewer asks the trainer if he can tell a bit about what kind of person the boxer Jean-Pierre is. He's an artist, replies the trainer, saying that this is the most fitting way to describe him. He has invested his entire life sculpting the beauty that comes from perfect technique, and anyone could say that he has devoted his whole life to this beauty. The interviewer, alongside his team, emphasizes the perfection of the technique, and mentions that he heard the champion's training style is quite unique, asking if they can see a bit of it. The trainer responds that he can't show too much of his training, but shows Gene meditating in the ring, and the entire team watches him closely. The interviewer confirms that it's true that Gene meditates before starting his training, and says that he once interviewed another boxer who trained at the same gym as the champion. Recalling the interview, he mentions that he thought at the time that Grigorievich, the fighter, was crazy, but with Gene he has no idea what's going on in his head. In the interview, Grigorievich says that Gene always meditates first before training, but it's not just for a few minutes, it's more like at least an hour. Sometimes he sits and meditates all day. And after he gets up from his meditation, the way he trains is very different from the usual parameters. He assumes a fighting stance and remains as still as a rock. At first, Grigorievich had no idea what Gene was doing, but then he observed him more closely. He saw that Gene's position changed after he went back to hitting the heavy bag for a while. This left him super confused. Then he would take a breath and come back to see if he moved again. But an hour passed and he finally understood what Gene was doing. He then asked the interviewer if he wants to know what Gene was doing, and answers that he was practicing a jab. He was breaking down every movement into parts for a whole hour until he finally completed a jab. The interviewer, upon hearing this, can only conclude that Gene is truly crazy, and Grigorievich agrees. Back in the present, the interviewer concludes that everything Grigorievich said was true, but it doesn't make logical sense to him, as what is the purpose of this type of training? He asks if the meditation is meant to relax his mind and body. The trainer responds that on the contrary, saying that Gene is meditating to awaken all his senses and enhance them before entering battle. And he concludes by saying that he's sure the interviewer knows what it's like to concentrate intensely on something. He responds that of course he does. All stimuli around Gene disappear and only the object he focuses on becomes vivid. He is meditating to intensify this feeling multiplied several times. The trainer says he could spend the whole day explaining, but the interviewer would only understand if he tried it himself. However, he declines, saying he doesn't want to interfere. "Trust me," says the trainer, "it will take much more than this to make him lose focus." Even feeling awkward, the interviewer agrees to try. He sits in front of Gene and also tries to meditate. The trainer says it's quite simple. He just needs to sit in a comfortable position and focus on the present. The interviewer takes this opportunity to sneak a peek at Gene and concludes that he can now see for himself that he certainly seems to have a unique aura about him. Now that he realizes this, the interviewer closes his eyes completely and tries to truly concentrate on meditation. The interviewer follows the trainer's instructions and tries to focus on the present. After a few seconds with his eyes closed, he wonders if he's doing it right. He then tries to concentrate more and understands that the present is silent. "Can you feel your heartbeat?" asks the trainer. The interviewer tries to listen to his heartbeat, and it beats strongly. Indeed, he managed to feel it. The more he concentrates, the more clearly he can feel it. The trainer says that this was good enough for a test, and says he's sure that he can feel something distinct even in this short time. If an untrained person can clearly feel the beat of their heart, imagine what a master in meditation could feel. Gene is deeply focused on his meditation. He feels every pulse of his heart, every fiber of his muscles, every living cell in his body, all the central connections in his brain, and his entire bodily nervous system. The trainer says that the champion's desire is to achieve total control of his muscles, from the strongest to the weakest, from his head to the tips of his toes. And with all this control, he aims to reach the pinnacle of technique. The day has turned into night, and the champion awakens from his meditation. He asks if the reporter has already left. The trainer responds that he has. Since the meditation took so long, he said he would return next time to complete the interview. The trainer asks Jin if this is because of that boxer. Jin simply replies that it is, and says that the way he moves and his timing are different. Strategy, reach, evasion, stance change, and defense, all techniques that Gene has honed and polished, are all useless against him. He says that's why he needs to intensify his focus even more. The trainer doesn't like hearing this and tries to get his attention. Then a training partner overhears what Gene said through the trainer, and says he tried to argue but wasn't listened to. Everyone present in the gym is surprised. Gene, with his cold gaze, prepares to fight all three at once, and not only that, but all of them are armed with knives. Gene simply tells them to come at him. The guys are stunned and don't know how to react. One of them thinks they just have to trust Gene's ability and everything will go well. Another says he can't be responsible for what's going to happen. With that, the three of them launch their attack. Gene also moves towards them. His trainer, who was watching everything, is amazed by the outcome. He's already finished what he wanted, and on the ground we see only one of the guys fallen with a knife beside him. Gene says this won't work and that it's not enough. There's no murderous intent in your opponents. At another moment, Gene is interviewed and asked what boxing represents to him. "The pursuit of beauty," he replies. "Every heartbeat, every breath, every movement from the largest muscle to the smallest fiber must be perfect. The belt is the confirmation that the one who wears it is the closest to achieving perfection. I see perfection," he says, "the perfection that is only sublime in its beauty." That first jab of the fight. How many people truly understood the meaning of that jab? Even Gene was surprised by it. Trainer K looks proud. Gene tries to maintain his composure, but his eyes are glued to the fight. The perfection he has been pursuing his whole life was there. After this, we see a patrol car driving through the city in the rain. One of the officers comments that a strange rumor is circulating among the local criminals. His partner asks what kind of rumor. In an alley, a fight is happening. The thug with a white weapon in hand who is there takes a punch right to the face and falls to the ground with a bleeding nose. The officer continues, saying that a guy suddenly appeared and started beating up the local criminals with his bare hands. We see a hooded man in the alley near the fallen thug. As we get closer, we see that the man is Jean-Pierre. The officer doesn't know this, but concludes that this man must want to be some kind of hero or something like that, and hopes that's all it is. According to the thugs, the man is also collecting their blood. A scene cuts to the side of an old mansion. Inside, a painting is being created with blood instead of paint. Heavy thunder crashes outside the house, making a lot of noise. But this doesn't scare the painter, the same one who attacked the thugs on the street. He says that this isn't enough. Later, in another location, we see a training session. The fighter's feet are moving very quickly. Jean's trainer watches him and asks what happened for him to be like this. He notices that in just a few days, Jean's shadowboxing technique has changed completely. His movements are imperative and desperate. Jean is moving faster than usual, yet he is still extremely precise in his movements. He's able to evade attacks more quickly. His trainer thought he had already achieved perfection, but recently he is improving at an incredible pace. But how is this possible in such a short period of time? The trainer admires Jean for this. His training ends and night falls in the city. Jean says goodbye to his trainer. The trainer, in turn, calls him by name and says he has seemed tired lately and asks if everything's okay since Stella, his wife, was worried about him coming home late at night. Jean pauses for a moment and asks if that's how he looks. He then says that he has never felt as good in his life as he does now. The trainer seems to have anticipated such a response. Jean turns to leave, but his trainer calls him again and tells him to stay well and not get too deeply absorbed. Jean hears his trainer and walks away. It seems the words had no effect on him, but he continues walking and leaves. In an alley somewhere in the city, a thug is chatting with his gang, and someone approaches him. The person stares from a distance and hooded moves into the alley. Their movements are light and calm. The thug wonders what this is. Then Jean stands in front of him, surrounded by the entire gang. His heart is beating faster than normal, but his eyes are as cold as ever. The thug asks if he's the guy who's been causing trouble in the alleys recently. Jean simply assesses the situation and notices that about 3 meters ahead, there's a man carrying a gun. At 11 o'clock, an individual who appears unsure if he's armed. At 9 o'clock, about 5.5 meters away, a woman carrying a knife. At 1 o'clock, about 3.5 meters away, a man holding a knife. At 5 o'clock, about 4.5 meters away, another guy with a knife. His heart is still racing from adrenaline. Jean, in turn, says they're not good looking. The armed thug asks what he's talking about and holds his weapon, saying that he just made a big mistake by acting like an idiot in front of him. But before any of them can do anything, Jean strikes him in the face. He says he will first use the jab, the punch with the best reach and speed, to temporarily incapacitate the armed man. While he faces the next gang member, Jean notices that the fastest they can react to an unexpected situation is in about 0.4 seconds. Next is the guy who must be armed. He will use his strongest punch to incapacitate him for a good while. That was a very good move. He says he will take a quick breath and go after the guy with the knife at 2 o'clock. Thus, he concludes that it was the perfect time and distance. He has 2 seconds until the guy at 10 o'clock with a knife reaches him. Jean dodges the knife of the guy at 2 o'clock and says his move is obvious and predictable. Then he will land a right hook. Since it's a clean hit, he doesn't need to worry about this target anymore. Immediately, he switches his stance and uses the rotation of his body to deliver a full-powered punch and put the guy with the gun to sleep. The knife guy at 10 o'clock is in shock. Jean finds this method inspiring. Now for the last guy at 5 o'clock. He turns around but is surprised because the guy points a gun at him. This is the worst possible scenario because the man is about 10 meters away. Jean's heart, which was already racing, now accelerates even more. He panics for a moment thinking he's going to die, with his heart feeling like it's about to explode. At the same time, a gunshot happens. Jean concentrates and manages to feel the internal movements of his body, but the man still points the gun at him. He remains standing in front of the armed man. All of his organs and nervous systems react electrifyingly to the gun pointed at him, awakening a type of adrenaline he has never felt before. The currents in his brain seem like a light show from how hard they're working. With all this reaction, the man is struck full in the face, as Jean had all of his energy focused on that punch. The city, seen from the horizon, looks calm, and the commotion is confined to the alley where the chaos occurred. Jean is sweating coldly after the fight. He looks at his hands and wonders if he really did that. He finally achieved what he wanted. For the first time, his eyes show some satisfaction as he finally reached his goal. Back in his sinister mansion, he paints another picture with human blood he collected. He emits a satisfied smile as he now has achieved a satisfactory result. While he brushes his painting, he remains enthusiastic in his own way, saying that now it's time to meet him. Someone enters through a door. It was the trainer who arrived at the gym. He sees Jean and says that he arrived earlier. But upon closer inspection, he sees that Jean isn't acting normally. Gene, in turn, tells the trainer that he needs to preserve this current feeling. With that, he gets up and quickly goes to the punching bag. The trainer calls his attention and says that his eyes are changed, and he wonders if something happened last night. Gene is already training with the punching bag. The trainer thinks he might have finally achieved what he wanted. Gene is intensely focused on his training. He thinks about his opponent, Yu. With this, his eyes widen. What does it mean to be human? He thinks. As he strikes the punching bag, he reflects. Humans are imperfect beings, according to him. This attitude doesn't please his trainer, but he continues, saying that the countless errors in justice make everyone look clumsy and foolish. His expression shows dissatisfaction with all of this. He concludes that he has to overcome all errors and imperfections. With a knee strike on the punching bag, he throws it away until it hits the wall and stops. This satisfies him for a brief moment. His trainer observes everything he does and notices the sand falling from the punching bag through the hole caused by the punch. He says that perhaps Gene has achieved it. Gene says he is seeking perfection. Elsewhere, Stella, his wife, is crying and calling Gene an idiot, wondering how he could say such terrible things to her earlier. The bartender at the bar where she is wonders what's wrong with her, as she's had only one non-alcoholic drink and is already so upset. He tells her that he has to close the establishment now. In turn, she glares at him angrily and asks if he finds her annoying too. Serious, the bartender replies that he does. She continues crying, saying that all men are equally idiotic, and wonders why they find her annoying when she is beautiful and sweet. The bartender hears this and thinks he just wants to go home. Elsewhere, Yu is being instructed to do another set, just like the one he's doing. He performs the exercise faster and faster. Gradually, he finishes the sit-ups. The secretary watches from a distance, noting that Yu has intensified his training as the fight for the title approaches. His trainer tells him to keep up the pace of the training. Yu doesn't seem tired at all. Kei says he needs a strong body ready for any movement and prepared for any situation. He also advises him not to imitate anyone but to do what he has always done and what his body tells him to do. That's all he needs, says his trainer. The secretary, watching from afar, thinks Yu will win this time as well. Otherwise, the coach wouldn't have brought him. That's the kind of person he is. His life's purpose is to win. While listening to the coach giving instructions to Yu, the secretary is sure that in his mind, there is nothing but victory and defeat. Kei tells the protagonist to take a short break now, and then they'll go straight back to training for the next exercise. But the secretary wonders what it's like for Yu and says she doesn't know what he's thinking. Why did he become a boxer? She asks. The day passes and night falls. Outside, the secretary sees Yu leaving and asks if he's done training for today. He just looks at her without saying anything. She says she has something to ask Yu and inquires why he decided to become a boxer. The protagonist looks at her over his shoulder and thinks about the answer he will give. Then he says he's not sure how to describe it, but that for a moment in the past he thought he saw a light and wanted to confirm what it was that he had seen. A light, the girl asks, not quite understanding. He remains silent for a brief moment and reaffirms that he is still not sure. With that, he says goodbye to the girl. She is intrigued but lets him go and tries to understand what the light you mentioned could be. She wonders if Yu will be able to find something there. As he walks away, she watches him from a distance, still surprised by what she heard. She didn't expect the protagonist to be sentimental. Everyone has their own reason for stepping into the ring. For some, it's for honor. For others, it's to try to find themselves. But some, though they are just one in countless numbers, still have a reason. Now, among all these boxers with their reasons and purposes, the two best face off in a match to determine the lightweight champion. Photographers try to capture the moment of the two fighters staring each other down. Their faces show no reaction as expected. But for a brief moment, Gene tells himself that he cannot wait, and that he can't stand waiting any longer to face his opponent in the ring. The night takes over the city. Shin's trainer watches him. Gene looks back at him. "Are you serious?" asks the trainer. Gene replies that he is. The trainer says that every individual has an ideal that he or she keeps close to their heart. He questions the point of living a life where you turn your back on your ideal. Gene says that even if it means he might die in the fight, the trainer shouldn't give up. Hearing this, the trainer becomes serious. Quickly, the day of the match arrives. Gene brushes his teeth after waking up. Meanwhile, he looks at himself in the mirror and notices something interesting. From the top of his toothbrush to the tips of his fingers, he can feel the shape of each tooth. When he puts on his clothes, he can feel every fiber on his skin. And even with each step he takes, he vividly feels the contraction of his muscles starting from his toes, moving up through his heels, knees, and thighs with each step. It's a world where every moment in time feels precise and everything is clear. Suddenly, he shows a slight smile. In front of him is the painting he made, which is responsible for evoking this feeling in him. His expression reveals a kind of morbid joy. In the arena where the fight will take place, the stands are packed. The announcer greets everyone and says that the day has finally come to decide the lightweight champion. The incomparable 10-year champion who has never lost a match against the top boxer or contender for the title. On TV, the secretary watches the fight, apparently anxious about what might happen. Others are also watching the match. The championship belt is prominently displayed. Trainer K asks if he was watching and says he will have it soon. He guarantees that the protagonist will gain more than just a belt. Soon, you will be the best among the weight classes and will hold all the belts in his hands. Yu looks at him with his classic serious expression, and the trainer tells him to go and claim what is rightfully his. Jin's trainer says he is sure that Jin knows more than anyone about the strength of his opponent, but he adds that Jin has surpassed all his limits, and this is probably his best chance to achieve his desired ideal. Finally, he tells Jin to go and fulfill his ideal. The fight between Jean-Pierre and Yu is about to begin. The announcer asks if the 10-year undefeated champion will be able to protect his title or if the belt will have a new owner, ushering boxing into a new era. All boxing fans are focused on the most anticipated match of the division. The long-awaited fight has finally begun. Soon after, Jin tries to land a punch on Yu. Yu, in turn, dodges it effortlessly. Then Jin throws several punches in Yu's direction. The announcer points out Jin's reach and speed. The commentator says it looks like the champion came prepared. Yu continues to dodge all the blows. His trainer praises his performance and is just waiting for Jean-Pierre's defeat. Yu, in turn, stands with his traditional posture and thinks this match will be more enjoyable than he expected. What follows is a story about the author's unusual personal experience. It happened about 16 years ago when the creator was an elementary school student. Obsessed with sports in school, he played basketball. He still vividly remembers that moment. Once he jumped higher than he ever had before, surprising all of his teammates and opponents and even himself. At that moment, when he jumped so high it felt like flying, it was the first time in his life he experienced a feeling where gravity seemed to not exist. That jump was the first and last perfect jump of the creator's life. From the start of the run, to the bend of the knees, the bend of the hips, the swing of the arms, and the final extended jump, every movement flowed smoothly and effortlessly as if someone else were jumping in his place. After that moment, the creator tried to recreate the same jump countless times but was never successful and never flew again. Here's another story, you may have heard it before. If you watch interviews with baseball hitters at the peak of their career, you might hear some of them say, "There was a moment when I could see every stitch of the ball coming toward me, and I would move reflexively." A clear, sunny sky contributes to this. And there are countless other legendary moments that go down in sports history. Just like Roberto Carlos' free kicks, where he struck with a curve and the ball would bend, allowing it to change direction mid-air and easily go into the goal. Confounding the goalkeeper who didn't know how to react, similar moments occur in tennis, when a player tosses the ball high and hits it with all their strength, with the racket, leaving the opponent thoroughly confused, and the ball striking the clay court with precision. In the fight, Jun's movements are no different. His feet and his classic stance compared to top-level athletes in other sports and Yu's dodging is equally impressive, as only a worthy opponent can evade so many attacks. Jin observes his opponent's movements, noting the angle of his foot, the tension in his calf, his cold and calculating gaze, the tension in his waist. All of this impresses him. He notices that the opponent will soon enter through this angle and thinks about the best course of action. When Jin attempts to strike Yu, he misses, as the protagonist dodges the attack but fails to counter. The announcer mentions that the challenger, who dominated all of his previous fights, is struggling to get close to the champion. As expected of the champion, he's showing his opponent that he is in an entirely different league, the announcer concludes. Trainer K says he is surprised. Although he knew the opponent was a remarkable boxer, he could only call him a genius at best. But now he's a monster at the limit. Did he reach that realm through his own efforts? Ku wonders with a sarcastic smile. Most soldiers who have spent a long time on the battlefield probably experienced that moment of war. Trainer K was one of those. He recalls his time in the Special Forces using a mirror to try and spot the enemy, only to have it shattered by a distant shot. K turned to one of his comrades and said he would go first. He then decided to advance. In the midst of battle, where the tension was extreme and life or death situations were relentless, an enemy projectile comes toward him, and K manages to escape. He too experienced that moment, when the heart races due to adrenaline. As he ran, he dodged bullets as best as he could. Numerous bones and skulls of the dead were in his way, leaving him extremely terrified. However, that moment lasted only a fraction of a second, but when a bullet almost hit his face, it felt as if time had stopped. Humans are born with potential to reach the extremes of their cognitive ability, and with this potential, they surpass the limits of human capacity. A major mistake is to assume that this transcendental cognitive ability only conveys tremendous evasive skills. No, what this ability gives us, according to Trainer K, is control over the body. Dozens of muscle fibers and joints all contract and relax at precise points and with perfect timing, and no energy flow is allowed to escape. The ability that sets world records, that remains unbroken for a long time, that creates legendary moments and immortalizes them in the sports world, is the same one that makes unrestricted technical perfection possible. The same ability Jin uses. Trainer K says he has been waiting for an opponent like him to appear. He says boxing is not a sport for breaking records. It is a sport where two people face off at the limits of their abilities. Therefore, no matter how strong a boxer is, it is impossible for him to show his true strength if his opponent is weak. But if the opponent is Jean, perhaps Kay will see both performances at their peak. Jean's trainer, in turn, only watches his fight attentively, but Kay wants him to show his true strength. As someone striving to push the limits of his abilities, Jean is capable of demonstrating how far he can go, and trainer Kay wants him to show the full extent of his true power. Meanwhile, the protagonist, who is also in the fight, dodges his opponent's attacks, tries to strike him in sequence, and then dodges again, trying increasingly to close the distance between them. Jean is very close to him now. Yu tries to hit him, but Jean dodges. The opponent attempts to counterattack, but also misses. With a punch, Yu tries to attack again, but misses. The audience, however, finds the match very exciting, wondering how the two are evading the blows so swiftly. Even the announcer says he can't believe what he's seeing and that a fierce battle is taking place. The tension in the ring is so palpable, it can be felt outside. Trainer Kay wonders what Jen's next move will be. The way things are going now, he's going to take you by surprise with his long reach, Kay concludes. Jin keeps his guard up and observes his opponent's movements. Yu, on the other hand, remains stationary. He's thinking about what was said before the fight. His trainer reminds him that his fight is tomorrow, and asks if he has been watching the title matches of the most famous champions every day as instructed. The protagonist responds that he has and will imitate his opponent's movements according to the situation. But Kay doesn't like hearing that and bursts into laughter. He says he doesn't know what made you think that, and asks if he didn't notice anything unusual when watching the videos. Why didn't you notice? Why do you keep moving like that? Why are you hitting so lightly? This is what you need to understand. Remember his movements, but don't mimic them, Kay says. Think and decide for yourself. Listen to what your body tells you. That's all you need to know, concludes the trainer. Seeing Yu change his stance, Kay smiles. The announcer wonders why the protagonist did that. The commentator notes that he shifted his weight precariously forward. Jean observes the extreme weight shift. It reminds him of the initial crouch in track and field. Yu's face is fully exposed, and it looks like even a light touch would be enough to knock him down. However, thanks to his new self, Jean knows he will be in trouble if he attacks now, so he intends to focus exclusively on his defense. But in a brief moment of distraction, Yu lands a precise blow on him. This leaves everyone watching the fight stunned, except for trainer Kay, who seemed to be anticipating this moment. The entire fight venue and the audience come to a brief halt as Jean-Pierre, the undefeated champion for 10 years, falls to the canvas. He showed his true self. Our video ends here. To ensure you don't miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel. A long time ago, there was a famous blacksmith who lived in the area. He owned his own shop and sold equipment that was all handmade. One day, he was fortunate enough to start selling everything he produced to the kingdom of Cairo. Amidst an endless war, that was the perfect opportunity for him to elevate his status. With the end of the conflict, this same blacksmith was granted the title of Baron. And this man is the owner of these lands and the father of the young master Romain, who is the protagonist of this story. We see an old man telling this story to a seated boy. Meanwhile, a mustached man standing behind them wonders why the boy is paying so much attention to something that everyone already knows. However, the story then takes us back a few hours. The young man asks if he is the eldest son of the Dmitri family, if they are in the kingdom of Kiro on the Salamander continent, and if the Murim world really doesn't exist. The mustached man affirms this while thinking that the young man has always been odd, but today he really seems out of his mind. Perhaps he's been using some of those strange drugs that have become popular among the rich these days. The mustached man then mentions that a young lady from the Lawrence family is coming to visit them. But as he says this, he reflects on how the young man has been wasting his life over the past 25 years. That's why he's known as the Dmitri family's trash. The man tries to explain the importance and values of the girl, but Dmitri interrupts him, saying there's something more important. He asks for the oldest person in these lands to be brought to him, someone much more important than this young lady, because he needs to learn how to live in this current world. The mustached man is confused as to why a 25-year-old would say something like that, but as a servant, all he can do is obey. The story then returns to the present. The old man says that's all he knows about these places. Dmitri thanks him and says he will give him a reward, but the old man simply responds that it was an honor to speak with the young master. Now Dmitri knows that everyone knows him as Roman Dmitri. However, his true name is Bak Jong-kuk. He's a person from the Murim world who lived a life of wars, conquered everything he wanted, and died in peace at the end. But for some strange reason, he woke up in this body. He doesn't know if this is the will of the heavens or a punishment for not accepting ascension. Suddenly, they hear a noise outside and someone yells for a bastard. A boy gets kicked in the face while everyone watches. Surrounded by thugs in front of a small shop, he bleeds and can't respond, while the men keep calling him a filthy bastard and continue to beat him mercilessly. Dmitri's servant approaches to take a look, but is immediately shocked. He recognizes that red fang tattoo all too well. Beside him, someone asks what's going on. Dmitri orders him to answer quickly. The servant explains that these are the Bloodfangs, a group known not only in Dmitri's territory but also in the nearby regions. It seems the boy on the ground owes them something. The servant tries to tell Dmitri not to get involved because it will only cause trouble. However, the young man has already disappeared from his side and orders the thugs to stop. As Dmitri calmly approaches, the servant desperately tells him not to do anything, but Dmitri continues to walk forward. A bald man appears, recognizes Dmitri, and laughs in his face, warning him to stay out of it and not to think he has any authority just because he's of noble birth. Everyone says it's better if he doesn't interfere because it's none of his business. The servant continues to insist that they won't gain anything by going against the Bloodfangs. But Dmitri simply calls for Hans. He doesn't know the rules of this place, so he wants an explanation. Who broke the rules of this land and who should be punished? Hans hesitates for a moment, swallowing hard with fear before speaking. He says that if the boy really is in debt and didn't pay, he is guilty. However, the Bloodfangs don't have permission to punish someone like this. Worse still, they disrespected the eldest son of the Dmitri family, which in itself is a crime punishable by death. According to the rules of this place, it wouldn't be strange if they were executed for this. The thugs just stare, while Hans wonders if he should have said that. Dmitri then asks if they heard the explanation. He picks up a stick from the ground and declares that as the eldest son of the Dmitri family, he will have to punish them all. The bald man tries to explain that Dmitri is a noble and doesn't understand how the world works. He tells him to look at their shoulder tattoos and warns that if he continues acting like this, everyone will be in a difficult situation. Dmitri only says that this proves what he wanted to know. The bald man, now confident, asks what Dmitri is talking about. The young man explains that from what he can tell, they are nothing but trash since they speak this way about the lord of this land. He advances, saying that he doesn't care about the reputation they have in this place. The thugs are taken aback because they didn't expect the boy to actually attack like that. But now he will have to defend the honor of the Bloodfangs, and he slashes at Dmitri's neck. However, he immediately feels something strange. Dmitri had already plunged that branch into him. Without hesitation, Dmitri pulls it out and turns toward the other two thugs, but they only curse him, calling him a bastard and vowing to take revenge for their leader. Hans warns Dmitri to be careful, pointing out that the thugs are far better armed than he is. Yet Dmitri easily dodges their attack. He lands a swift kick to one thug's shin and follows it up with a punch to the face. The servant is bewildered. He had no idea that the young master could fight like this. To him, it doesn't even make sense that this could be the same Master Roman. The first thing Beck saw when he opened his eyes was a farewell letter on the floor and scattered drugs. The kingdom of Kiro, always at war, had to choose a representative from each of its noble houses to serve in the army. Roman was chosen to be his family's representative. However, he chose to take his own life instead. Beck reflects that it was a pathetic life, regardless of what Roman went through. But the current owner of this body is the leader of the celestial demon sect, and now he will live as he pleases. And boy, with just a stick, he painted the entire town red. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to censor this part because the boy is just too cruel. Behind him, someone calls him a monster. One of the last remaining Bloodfangs tries to flee, but Dmitri grabs him by the hair, slams him to the ground, and declares that the law must be obeyed. He warns that this last one will be allowed to live as a warning of what happens when the law is disobeyed. He gathers everyone in the town and declares that his name is Roman Dmitri. If anyone disagrees with the punishment he has dealt to these people, they can come find him at any time. Back Jong-hyuk. He reached the pinnacle of the Mirim world with incomparable strength. Hundreds of thousands of martial artists were defeated and massacred by him. When the blood of his enemies formed a river, everyone recognized that the celestial demon sect controlled the Mirim world. But now in this moment he has to exert himself just to deal with street rats. He calls for Hans and instructs him to notify the guards about everything that happened and to have someone clean up the place. The servant simply replies that he will do it immediately and runs off. Dmitri reflects on how weak and useless this body he inhabits is. He needs to accelerate his efforts to gather information on how to strengthen himself. Just then, the boy he had saved earlier gets up and thanks him for saving his life. Dmitri remembers that this was the boy who was being beaten but tells him that what he did was not intended to help him. The Bloodfangs broke the law and were punished, and that's all. Now the boy will have to explain his situation if he wants to keep his tongue. The poor boy, having just tried to express his gratitude, receives a threat instead. However, he says he will explain. His relatives borrowed money from the Bloodfangs to complete the purchase of some land and start farming. They would have easily been able to repay the amount they borrowed by selling their crops. But the damn Bloodfangs went to the land and destroyed all the crops so that they couldn't pay back the debt. Only later did the boy discover that they did this to blackmail his family and take his younger sister. The boy screams that the world isn't fair because even though they didn't have much, they never harmed anyone. The only thing he begs for is for Dmitri to save his sister. But Beck just observes the boy's eyes. That look reminds him of the Mad Demon, one of the 4 superior kings and someone he also met in a place as wretched as this. He then asks the boy his name, to which he replies, Kevin. With that, Roman says he will look into the situation and take care of everything. The boy shouts his thanks, while Dmitri senses that he will have a long relationship with this boy. The scene shifts to a carriage approaching. Someone inside informs Miss Flora that they are nearing the Dmitri estate. The blonde sighs, saying she understands. It seems she will have to meet this Roman Dmitri. A month earlier, someone shouted in a castle, demanding to know why there is an arranged marriage with the Dmitri family. Her father tries to remind her that their lands have been in terrible condition due to the ongoing war. However, Flora is confused, questioning whether the marriage was decided this way, and worst of all, it's with the Dmitris, a family full of old miners and a bunch of blacksmiths. She tries to explain something, but her father interrupts, saying all he can do is apologize for being so pathetic. Back in the present, the man in the carriage announces that they've arrived. Flora had hoped that at least the marriage would be with the second son, who seemed to have a promising future. But even that was ruined because Roman himself begged his father for her hand in marriage. She knows very well the reputation this man has for living a life of luxury and pleasure, and now she doesn't understand why they drenched him in so much perfume. As she walks through the corridors, she thinks that no matter how much her father needs this, she won't accept it, and she needs to make that clear. At that moment, she turns to Dmitri and says she wants him to forget about this marriage. Radiantly, he replies that it's indeed a great idea. At this point, the poor girl is utterly confused. Dmitri explains that he thought better about this marriage and realized it's foolish for someone as amazing as her to marry the idiot of the Dmitri family. Flora is left bewildered, wondering if he's being serious. He then tells her that something very important has come up and he needs to speak with his father immediately. However, she stops him, asking what's going on. She had heard that this marriage was only happening because he asked his father for it, but now he's suddenly canceling it without hesitation, which leaves her perplexed. Dmitri simply asks her if she really wants to marry him, and when she replies no, he tells her that in that case, they no longer need to cause problems for each other, and he'll take care of everything. He reassures her that she doesn't need to worry because he will take full responsibility. Since he's already called the idiot of the Dmitri family, he doesn't mind being called the divorced one as well. She can't understand why he seems so determined. Is this really the same idiot everyone talks about? The door then closes behind him, and from inside, she hears a heated argument. Someone yells, asking what's the meaning of canceling this marriage. However, Dmitri calmly informs his father that he's just letting him know because he's already told the girl. His father calls him an idiot, pointing out that everyone already calls him the fool of the Dmitri family, and what he was trying to do was secure a good relationship for the boy. It was the only thing he needed to do, as it would guarantee noble status for their family. All Dmitri had to do was marry a beautiful girl whom he himself had begged for. Dmitri apologizes, but his father grabs something from the table and throws it at his head, demanding to know if he thinks an apology will fix this. He had been planning to do something about sending him to the battlefield for the next 6 months, but now that seems inevitable, and he asks if Dmitri has anything to say. Dmitri simply replies that he has nothing to add. His father then mentions that he heard Dmitri got involved with the Bloodfangs and even punished them, but he doesn't believe it. He should know that even he can't go against that group, so now Dmitri will have to deal with his own problems. His father won't help him at all. Watching the boy remain silent, his father expects him to kneel and start crying, but Dmitri just responds that he understands and will handle everything on his own. Confused, his father stands up and asks what he means. But Dmitri simply says that the problem was caused by his actions, so he will resolve it and only return once everything is fixed. With that, he closes the door and begins to clean his face. Someone nearby asks if he's going crazy. Dmitri turns to see Flora and questions why she's still there. She tries to warn him that he's going against the Bloodfangs, who don't even fear nobles. If they see him as a threat, they'll probably kill him. She advises him to return to his father, beg for forgiveness, and give up on this. But Dmitri only asks why he would do such a thing. She explains the reasons, but Dmitri interrupts her, stating that it seems she really doesn't know her place. The scene shifts to a few hours earlier when Hans was dousing Dmitri with perfume to try to mask the smell of blood, and Dmitri was eager to take off the tight-fitting clothes. However, the servant explained that this was the only way to show respect. But Dmitri was thinking about this marriage. He's still adjusting to this world, and this would only complicate his understanding. The servant suggested they go downstairs to handle the situation. Dmitri thought that since the girl had never done anything against him, he had no reason to disrespect her, which is why he intended to end things with as little offense as possible. But now he realizes that the girl never planned to show him any respect in the first place, which gives him no reason to do so either. He then tells her that from his perspective, she seems very arrogant. However, it's ridiculous for her to show concern now when she didn't consider any circumstances while trying to break off the marriage. But when he told his father that he would take full responsibility, that's when she got anxious. He accuses her of wanting to appear like a good person after putting him in this situation. but she needs to understand that at no point did she interfere with his decision. They will now go their separate ways and each will take care of their own lives. He told his father that he would take full responsibility to prevent people from thinking that this was a consequence of the end of their relationship and because he wanted no further involvement with her. This was the first and last time they would see each other. Later that same night, someone tells another to stop drinking. It's Lehana, Dimitri's mother. His father confesses that today, unfortunately, he used violence against Roman again. This is because after becoming nobles, he never wanted his son to go through that situation again. Lehana tries to reassure him, saying it's all right and that their children have grown up healthy. The father acknowledges this, but admits that he still doesn't understand why the boy is like this, especially since Roman was the only one who went through hard times with him. He's at a loss for how to handle Roman. Lehana tells him it's okay. They may have made mistakes as parents, but that's part of life. Yet, even so, they are still the only ones who can correct the boy's wrong behavior. Lehana expresses confidence that the Romero she once knew will help their son get back on the right path. Her husband asks if she's referring to the issue with the blood fangs. She nods, saying she surely spoke out of anger, but since he can be a bit headstrong, it might be wise to talk to Captain Jonathan to help the boy out. He then calls for the servant and instructs him to summon Captain Jonathan. The next morning, Roman is walking through the town and Hans is trying to stop him, warning him that the blood fangs will likely try to take revenge for what happened yesterday. But Roman simply asks when Hans thinks these men became so powerful. Hans admits he has no idea. Roman explains that in war, fame is what generates fear. Because the blood fangs are ruthless, that fear has made them more efficient at completing their missions. Hans then asks if Roman is saying they aren't dangerous or that they are weak. Roman responds that they are only as weak as the amount of fear they can instill in him. The scene shifts to a restaurant where someone delivers a feast they had ordered. Hans is delighted, saying the food looks delicious. However, Roman stands up and says he's going out, but instructs Hans to stay behind, telling him that he'll continue the investigation, but that it would be too dangerous for Hans to accompany him. Hans jumps up, desperately insisting that he cannot allow something like that. Even if it means putting himself in danger, he must remain by the young master's side. Ronan pauses for a second and then asks Hans if he really considers himself one of his men. Hans confirms, saying he will always follow the young master. Ronan then tells him that he'll withdraw because he can't afford to lose someone as valuable as Hans in such a foolish way and reassures him that he'll be back soon. The poor Hans is left standing there, unsure of what to say but somewhat touched by the boy's words. As Hans runs off, he mutters that now is not the time to dwell on such things. He needs to inform others about this. Roman has realized over the past few days that the blood fangs aren't as strong as they seem. The problem is that because they operate in various small groups, it's difficult to eliminate the entire organization. They won't want to punish him publicly, and he can't locate them easily. But if that's the case, he just needs to make them come to him. That's why he deliberately walked through the city with Hans. Besides, today is a Dimitri Knight's training day, so the streets aren't heavily patrolled. This means that if they plan to seek revenge, this is the perfect opportunity. At that moment, a few men call out to Roman Dmitri from behind, and one of them jumps forward, declaring that this is their revenge, and that he will pay the price for getting involved with the blood fangs. But then someone calls for the captain. A man with messy hair turns around. It's Hans, running towards Jonathan, calling out his name. Jonathan approaches the servant, asking why he's so frantic. Struggling to catch his breath, Hans tries to explain what's happening with Dmitri and urges Jonathan to find the boy immediately because he's in danger. However, Roman effortlessly dodges the first attack, lands an elbow in the attacker's stomach, making him drop his dagger, and then catches it midair with his other hand. Before the man can react, he's already been struck. Everything happened too fast, and the man retreated, unsure of what had just occurred. The other thugs, seeing their comrade fall, are equally confused. This Dmitri was entirely different from the one they'd heard about. Ronan simply asks what they're doing and invites everyone to come at him at once. Back with the soldiers, Hans is frantically explaining the situation with the blood fangs. The soldiers exchange glances, saying it doesn't make any sense for Dmitri to be taking down the blood fangs. Hans insists that it's true, and that the boy has now gone up against all of them, making it very dangerous for them to just stand by. Jonathan recalls Romero mentioning all of this and asking for help. He just wants to know why Dmitri, who doesn't even know how to hold a sword properly, is getting involved in such matters. But he gathers everyone and tells them to grab their weapons, warning that they can't let anyone harm the young master. However, he'll be furious if the boy has actually caused trouble with the blood fangs. But the poor blood fangs were already on the ground. They attacked Dmitri, calling him a bastard, but he easily ducked under one swing and jabbed another in the stomach. Another bald man tried to come at him from the side, but Dmitri simply dodged and landed a kick to his belly. The fool collapsed and Dmitri asked if it was just the three of them. The man tried to threaten him, saying he wouldn't get away with killing the two of them, but Roman just laughed, asking if he didn't realize that three of them would die. Roman then lightly stroked the man's thigh, telling him that it would be best to answer his questions, starting with who their leader was. The scene shifts to another part of town at the same bar from earlier. Suddenly, everyone inside is startled as Roman returns. The bald man at the counter turns to welcome him. He greets the young master. who responds with a cheery wave. The man wonders why Roman is acting so strange today and why he's even there. The bartender decided to ignore Roman's odd behavior and asked what he wanted to drink. Roman asked for a tear of the dawn. The bartender explained that they didn't serve such a drink there and asked if he wanted something else. Dimitri then requested the strongest drink they had because he had something to take care of in the morning. Earlier, someone had mentioned that everything was connected to the dew of the dawn at a bar in the middle of the city where they took on all their missions. All they needed to do was pass the special code. Roman asked what that code was, and the man had given him the exact code Dimitri had just used. At that moment, everyone fell silent. The bartender called out to the others in the bar, and just as he was about to give the order to attack, he was struck in the face. Everyone was shocked that the young man would do something like that in front of everyone, and they got up, shouting to kill him. Meanwhile, the townsfolk fled the bar to call the guards, but it was a quick strike to the back of one's neck and a chokehold for the others. A bunch of men were on the ground, bewildered, wondering what had just happened. The so-called idiot of the Dimitri family had taken down 3 people before they could even register what was going on. In the world of Murim, the strongest aspect is that one can strengthen themselves with breathing techniques. In a short time, Bake had managed to improve Dimitri's body. Of course, he was far from what he used to be, but these men no longer posed any threat to him. A little later, the bartender began to get up, trying to understand what had happened. Ronan commented that he had gotten up just in time, as he was about to finish everything. The bartender, a chubby man, asked why Roman was attacking their establishment. Dimitri called him an idiot, pointing out that he knew the bartender had sent the men to attack him. However, there were some things he was very curious about, so they would need to have a little chat. Sometime later, Jonathan arrived at the scene and questioned whether this was really something the young master had done. At that moment, a soldier appeared on the 2nd floor, informing Jonathan that it seemed the young master had gone to the Lawrence estate. Jonathan was confused and wondered why. The soldier reported that it appeared the base of the Blood Fangs was located there. An hour earlier, Dimitri had told the bartender that it would be better if he confessed everything immediately. At this rate, he would be running out of fingers before he told the truth. The bald man warned that he had nothing to say to the boy, that Dimitri might kill him, but the Blood Fangs would take revenge. Roman then smiled, saying that now he liked the man's attitude. The people who resist the most before telling the truth are the ones he enjoys making talk the most. The old man commented that it was a waste and urged Roman to kill him already, but Roman responded that this was what they were there to find out. He then stated that it was time to resolve this and that he would need to test whether the man really wouldn't say anything. Roman held up a photo of the man with the boy beside him and asked what would happen if, by chance, he found the boy in the photo and killed him. The bald man claimed that wasn't his son, so it didn't matter. But Roman remarked that he was a terrible liar since the boy was the spitting image of his father. The man cursed at Roman, asking how a noble could dare use family as a threat. Roman replied that he had learned that the Blood Fangs members often sacrificed their lives for revenge because the group itself usually corrupted people by using their families. They used debts and threats to corrupt others as well, and Roman believed that the easiest way to make someone do what you want is to use their family. The bartender insisted that it didn't matter even if Roman knew the truth, the Blood Fangs would still kill him. Roman warned him to be more careful when deciding where to place his bets. He was serious when he said he would kill the man's son, and it was a vow he would make in his name. But before sending the soldiers to hunt down the boy, he would give the man one last chance to tell the truth. Now he had to choose whether to bet on the Blood Fangs and watch his son suffer, or bet on Dimitri and let him take care of the men. But the choice was his. The scene shifted to a house in the middle of an alley. Someone asked if it was really true. The man confirmed that the entire division in the middle of the city had been wiped out by Roman alone, and if the knights got involved, it would truly be in danger. A grizzled old man with a resemblance to Wolverine remarked that he hadn't expected the boy to have such courage. But it didn't make sense for an entire division to be killed by a boy who had been rejected by the Swordsmanship Academy. The man asked where Roman was, and the other replied that he had just left the Dimitri region. He asked if the boy was alone, and the answer was yes. The man commented that it was good, as it seemed Roman intended to attack the entire place by himself. He then ordered everyone in the group to gather with the goal of killing Roman before they had to face the Dimitri Knights. After that, they would stretch the boy's body out in the town so that everyone would know what happens when you go against the Blood Fangs, thereby reviving their infamy. The scene then shifted to another castle. Someone asked what the Barco family was up to. It was a meeting of elders, and they were discussing how that family had borrowed a lot of money, which likely meant they were preparing for a war. And if that was the case, they would need to consolidate their forces before these men grew stronger. The blonde man remarked that it seemed war would be inevitable, something he never expected to happen. A bespectacled man added that the central government also appeared to be supporting the Barcos. The old man in the red suit slammed his fist on the table, declaring that they couldn't afford to lose any territory since the Lawrence family relied entirely on fertile land. Another tried to argue that the documents proved past debts, but the man dismissed this as lies. Someone interrupted the discussion, telling everyone to be quiet. The blonde man emphasized that they couldn't give up the territory or they would lose the rest to all the other families. Since the Barcos wanted to oppose them, they would have to resist with all their might. That's why they had arranged the marriage with the Dmitri family. The men smiled, agreeing that the Dmitris were indeed wealthy and that their weapons were top-notch. No matter how much money the Barcos borrowed, they would never have more wealth than the Dmitris. The father reiterated that this was why he had pushed his daughter to marry that idiot, as he surely wouldn't refuse her. Another man reassured him that he couldn't blame himself as a father, as it was the best choice for everyone. Outside, someone had been eavesdropping, Flora. Now she had no idea how she would break the news to her father. She couldn't imagine his reaction when he discovered she hadn't agreed to the marriage. But she also couldn't accept that her entire life would be sold to a man like that. The problem was that this wasn't just her father's plan, it was also the future of her family. But no matter what, she decided she would speak the truth. As she steeled herself to explain that she wouldn't marry someone she had no feelings for, a man arrived, urgently calling for the Lord. She turned confused. The man greeted Flora and then approached the door, calling for the Lord, shouting that it was an emergency. Flora was left utterly perplexed. Meanwhile, elsewhere, someone was pounding on a door, demanding that a bastard open it. It was Jonathan trying to enter the Lawrence territory, but the guard insisted that he follow the proper procedures. Jonathan warned that if Roman was harmed because of the delay, they would pay the price. At that moment, another man arrived at the gate, informing the captain that they were facing trouble. It seemed the Lawrence Square was also in chaos. Jonathan feared the worst and threatened to break down the door if they didn't open it. Back at the square, people were terrified by what was happening. Someone was hanging, and they were unsure whether they should intervene. It was the old Wolverine figure begging for someone to spare his life. He had been confident that defeating a single noble idiot would be simple. All they needed was anyone from the gang to handle it. But in reality, they had multiple armed men. He had been sure there was no way they could lose, or at least that's what he had believed. That is, until he saw everyone dead in front of him. Then he knew he was going to die too. He began to stumble over his words, pleading not to be killed, terrified of losing his life. Stuttering, he begged for mercy, grabbing Roman's leg and asking not to be killed. But Roman simply threw him into the middle of the city in front of everyone. The man pleaded, saying that if they spared him, he would serve as a dog for the rest of his life. Roman coldly responded that if he wanted to offer to become a dog, he should have done so before showing his fangs. He then announced to the city that this man was the leader of the Blood Fangs, and everyone knew the kind of person he was. They had threatened the Dmitri family and used dirty tricks to deceive people. The crimes committed by this organization were clear, and Roman declared that he would destroy the entire organization along with the evil they had spread. As the crowd stood in shock, Jonathan approached the square, and the scene left him speechless. There was no need to describe what happened to the leader. The scene then shifted back to the earlier meeting where someone asked if it was true. A soldier confirmed that he had allowed Roman Dmitri to enter because he was the future husband of Miss Flora. However, half an hour later, Roman had appeared, dragging a man through the middle of the city, claiming he was the leader of the Blood Fangs, and executed him in front of everyone. The father was left speechless, and everyone else questioned whether this made any sense. The bespectacled man pointed out that killing and punishing someone without the Lord's permission was something that couldn't be ignored. However, the Lord was not overly concerned with the series of problems that were emerging. He was more curious about the fact that the man who was to become his son-in-law had single-handedly wiped out the Blood Fangs. He then ordered that Roman Dmitri be summoned, as he wanted to speak with the boy himself. Sometime later, Roman was escorted in along with the man who had let him in and Jonathan. As a renowned knight, Flora's father immediately recognized Jonathan, which led him to believe that Roman had only managed to defeat the Blood Fangs with Jonathan's help. The eldest son of the Dmitri family then introduced himself. The father decided to ignore the explanations and directly asked why Roman had done something so violent. Roman explained that a few days ago, the Blood Fangs had committed a crime and beaten an innocent citizen. That's when he executed everyone in that very place. Outside, Flora was trying to eavesdrop on the meeting. She called a knight over and asked him to come closer. She questioned if he had really taken Roman Dmitri inside, and he confirmed it. She then asked why Roman had gone to her father's room. The knight hinted that she might be one of the last to find out, which understandably left her alarmed. Back in the meeting, Roman continued, explaining that was why he had to invade the Blood Fangs base and kill their leader. That was the summary of everything that had happened. However, the Lord pointed out that Roman didn't have the authority to execute someone on Lawrence land. Roman acknowledged this but doubted their ability to handle such men, given that the Blood Fangs were infamous in the region, abusing the local citizens while nothing was done about it. That's why he took matters into his own hands, because he couldn't trust the Lawrence family to do it. The two servants on either side were shocked and drew their attention to Roman. But Roman expressed disappointment, saying he had expected to be called here for praise for doing the job they had ignored. He then asked the Baron if what he had done was truly wrong. The Baron asked the man beside him if he knew about Ben Miles. The man responded that they were aware he wasn't a good citizen, but they never imagined he was the leader of the Blood Fangs. At that moment, the Lord concluded that was enough, deciding there was no point in continuing the discussion since it wouldn't have been a problem if the Lawrence family had taken care of the man themselves. He then said he would reward the boy and allowed him to leave. With that, Roman departed. The room fell silent, broken only by the Lord's laughter. The man beside him even wondered if the Lord had gone mad. The Lord seemed impressed, never having imagined that this was the true Roman Dmitri. The advisor attempted to argue that they couldn't leave such actions unpunished, but the father dismissed his concerns, saying that it was fine since Roman was going to be Flora's husband. He knew that only someone with such courage could achieve great things. The advisor tried to continue, but the father cut him off, saying he didn't want to hear any more and was pleased that the boy was perfect for his daughter. He then ordered Flora to be brought in so he could discuss everything with her. Meanwhile, on the way back to Dmitri territory, Jonathan remarked that Roman shouldn't have told the whole truth because even though they had gotten rid of the blood fangs, a lord seemed to have been left angered. But Roman simply replied that all he did was show that the situation had escalated due to their negligence. And since the Lord still didn't know about the canceled marriage, he wouldn't punish his daughter's husband. Jonathan quickly realized that Roman had planned everything, leaving him puzzled as to who this person before him really was. It was clear he was no longer the Roman Dmitri they once knew. A voice echoed in Roman's mind, calling him by his true name, Bak Jong-hyuk, and reminding him that, as the son of the celestial demon, he would have to prove he was qualified to succeed him. First, he would have to survive hunger, cold, and the hard ground. But his father had warned that if he died, it wouldn't matter since he could simply have another son. The only way to prove his worth was to rule over everyone. Of course, Bake had already been beaten down. A chubby kid laughed, saying he thought Bak would be stronger as the son of the celestial demon. But in the end, he was just an arrogant brat. Bak stood up only to be struck in the face again. The poor boy couldn't do anything. The other children, who stayed out of it, just thought he was an idiot. While most children were protected by their families during childhood, Bake had been forced to live in a world where only the strong survived. Back in Dmitri territory, Roman was now relaxing in a bathtub, enjoying a peaceful bath. He couldn't believe how exhausted his body had become from such a simple task. However, it was undeniable that since waking up in this world, he had experienced many things. To defeat the Bloodfangs, he had to kill everyone who stood in his way. Yet he had no regrets, as it proved that he hadn't changed as a person. If necessary, he would torture those who crossed him and eliminate anyone who sought to end his life. This was the life he had always lived, and nothing would change just because he had become Roman. The only problem was that it was becoming increasingly dangerous to go out as he had, and he didn't fully understand how this world operated. Not to mention, his true strength had diminished significantly, and he would need to think carefully about how to act in the future. Suddenly, someone called for the young master from the door, informing him that the Lord wished to speak with him. In the room, Romero asked if the boy had really done all that. Jonathan confirmed it, noting that Roman had changed a great deal. The father remained curious, but the knight insisted that this young master was not the same person they knew. Romero admitted that Roman had always been his greatest challenge, the only son with no notable characteristics, yet the only one who had endured the hardships when they were poor. A long time ago, Roman had handed his father a candy. When asked what it was, the boy had simply replied, "It's a sweet." Romero was working in the mines when he saw his son approaching and asked why he had come to such a dangerous place, reminding him that it wasn't safe. But the boy just smiled and said that his father worked too much, so he brought him a sweet to give him energy to work faster and come home sooner. All Romero ever wanted was for his son to be happy. That's why he always favored him and gave him money so he wouldn't be called poor. He never imagined that this would lead Roman down the wrong path. Part of him had already given up on the boy, but hearing that he had taken down the blood fangs filled him with a renewed sense of hope. At the door, Roman asked to enter. Romero thought to himself that regardless of how Roman had achieved it, he had managed to eliminate the blood fangs. If that was the case, he was ready to do anything for his son. This would be his excuse for having failed as a father before. When Roman entered, Romero remarked that he had heard that Roman had taken down the blood fangs by himself. Bake, now inhabiting Roman's body, observed the boy's father. He could see that the man was anxious and full of hope for what he was about to say. Buck knew that if he told the truth, he would be seen in a completely different light. The problem was that accomplishments beyond expectations always came with a price. If he downplayed things now, he might buy himself more time to develop further. As his father continued calling out to him, Bake debated whether to tell the truth or lie. Hiding the truth seemed the more rational decision. Bake's thoughts flashed back to when he was being beaten as a child. The bully taunted him, asking if that was all he had. Then Bake grabbed a rock from the ground and smashed it into the bully's face without mercy. The boy was badly hurt, falling to the ground, and Bake stood up, picking up another rock to finish him off. From that day on, everyone was afraid of him. That was when he learned that in a lonely world, the most powerful always reigns. He declared to everyone that the boy he had killed was the former leader of their group, meaning that now he was in charge. Demonstrating superiority was the only way to ensure total victory. That's why Bake, now Roman, decided to say, "Yes, I was the one who took down the Bloodfangs." He and the celestial demon didn't know how to hide their superiority. Sometime later in the city's training grounds, the young trainees were practicing their swordsmanship when someone ordered them to stop and show respect to the Lord who had arrived. Everyone immediately bowed, and a blonde boy in the group looked surprised, wondering why Roman Dmitri was there. The trainer announced that they would be testing their swordsmanship against Mr. Roman and invited anyone who wanted to participate to step forward. Strangely, everyone was sweating, and no one wanted to volunteer. The blonde boy couldn't understand why everyone seemed so afraid of Roman, or more accurately, why anyone would want to fight the idiot. An hour earlier, when Roman had confessed to his father that he was indeed the one who had taken down the Bloodfangs, his father asked how he had managed to defeat them. Needing to avoid raising suspicion, Roman explained that he had been secretly practicing swordsmanship. His father asked why he had kept it hidden, assuring him that he would have given him all the support he needed. Roman replied that he was tired of wasting his life and wanted to prove that even the idiot of the Dmitri family could accomplish something on his own. However, Romero found it hard to believe, saying it was impossible for someone to learn swordsmanship on their own to the point of killing those men. Roman explained that the Bloodfangs maintained their operations through threats, which was why he set a trap to lure out their leader. His father asked how he did it, and Roman explained that the Bloodfangs always retaliated against weaker nobles, so he used himself as bait. Romero said it was very risky because if they sought revenge, it would be easy for them. But Roman explained that most of the members were kept in line through threats, and he knew that if he could kill the leader, no one would want to save someone who had threatened them. Romero thought to himself that it was an extremely well thought out plan, and Roman had shown a lot of courage to follow through with it. Impressive would be an understatement for what he had done. To think that Roman was capable of such a thing. His father then asked if he could request a favor, and Roman agreed. Romero said he wanted to see the swordsmanship that Roman had been practicing with his own eyes to understand how much he had changed. Now back at the training grounds, Romero was startled by the fact that no one was volunteering. The blonde boy thought that whoever hit Roman would be expelled, and whoever lost would also be expelled for being so bad, making no one want to participate. Meanwhile, Jonathan was thinking that they needed someone who could defeat Roman easily to demonstrate the knight's skills. He announced that if no one volunteered, he would choose someone himself. As the master, Jonathan couldn't participate, so there was only one other option. He called out the name Chris, telling the boy to step forward, which shocked him. Chris was the vice captain of the Dmitri Knights. The first time he had met Roman was the previous year, when they had gone to a bar where people were complaining about a drunk causing trouble. There, they found someone shouting and demanding to know if they were trying to make a fool of him. The boy had asked if they really wanted to shut down the place. The attendants apologized and didn't quite know what to do. However, it was the drunken Roman who said that trash like them shouldn't even speak, and he ordered the guy to come over to him once again. They tried to say something, but he threw the bottle against the wall. That's when Chris told the boy that enough was enough, but he just asked who they were. Chris reached out to grab his wrist to get him out of there, telling him he was embarrassing himself, but he received a slap in the face, and Roman asked how a lowly knight like him had the courage to lay his hands on him. Well, with just that slap, Chris already knew that this boy had never trained a day in his life. His strength was at best below the average of a man. He felt sorry for the Lord for having a son like that guy, and he was absolutely certain that this was trash, better off dead. So why were they telling him to have a duel with this Roman? He tried to tell the captain that he didn't think it was a good idea and that there might be other more suitable people for it. However, Jonathan warned that the boy had taken down the blood prisoners, so it had to be him. Chris was about to say something, but Jonathan just cut him off. So he said he understood. Everyone was eager to see the duel, and the two calmly observed each other. Jonathan told them to wait, but at that moment, Chris said he had a request. He warned that he had a vow to be merciless in a duel, regardless of who it was. If they accepted this request, he would then participate in it. He was certain that this idiot wasn't the person who had defeated the blood prisoners. Jonathan and Romero seemed to agree, and Roman, of course, smiled, which did not make Chris happy at all. Jonathan said that by the laugh the boy had accepted, and then he told both sides to get ready. While Chris was consumed by anger, Roman was just smirking. The second Jonathan gave the signal, Chris immediately launched himself, while the boy stood still, waiting for him. He quickly observed one of the movements, and Chris delivered a full strike that the boy defended against. The people who trained with Chris immediately realized that he was giving it his all. However, Jonathan was already impressed. The boy had actually blocked it. Chris retreated immediately. He could tell the boy's strength just by the way he defended himself. Not to mention that his stance still seemed completely stable. It wasn't exactly how he expected this duel to go, but he didn't care about that. He would only be satisfied when he crushed this guy. He tried another slash, but Roman simply sidestepped. However, Chris saw this movement. He spun his body to hit him from the side, but the boy defended again. Roman seemed calm, observing the attacks, when Chris found an opening at his back. For him, the match was won now. It was just a matter of landing this blow, and it would be over. But Roman simply crouched. He saw an opening, and at that moment, Chris knew he was going to get hit. The attack brushed past his face, and the guy even got a new haircut. Terrified, he retreated. He realized how dangerous that had been, while the Lord and the captain couldn't believe it. For the people who trained with Chris, it made no sense that he was losing, and he himself wondered if this was really the skills of Roman Dmitri that he knew. From defense to evasion or attack, nothing was lacking. Could it be that he had really defeated the blood prisoners? Because if so, at this pace, At that moment, he said he was overthinking and Roman was still the same idiot as before. But that's when Roman said that was enough warming up, and he said that this time he would go first. And the poor guy hadn't even reacted yet. Too late when he realized it. He managed to defend himself the last second by sheer luck. While he couldn't believe that the boy was that fast, he made a move backward, but Roman kept closing in. All Chris could do was defend bit by bit, and the people around were scared by this sequence of attacks. Chris was having to give it his all just to manage to defend himself. He had to at least find an opportunity to end this. But then he took a hit to the arm that knocked him sideways. He realized he needed to step back, but that's when he noticed Roman was coming at him with an overhead attack. The movement seemed long and slow, and the middle of his chest seemed like the perfect opening. And he didn't hesitate to strike with full force. But it was just a trap from Roman, who easily dodged. He gave a little smile, and at that moment, Chris realized he had fallen into a trap. He knew there was no way he could win at this rate, and the worst part was losing to Roman. That's when he gripped his sword, and an aura emerged from it. Jonathan shouted and told him to stop that. But Chris had already activated the one-star aura. Of course, even Bake was surprised by that, and the arena exploded. The people around couldn't see anything. Romero was worried about what might have happened to Roman. He let out a sigh of relief, realizing that Roman had narrowly avoided getting hit by that aura-infused sword. Chris, disoriented after accidentally using the aura, was promptly struck on the chin for his troubles. Naturally, neither Jonathan nor Romero expected Roman to win, but there was Chris, lying on the ground. Everyone always asked who this new young prodigy of the captain was. The others would respond that he was one of the best they had ever seen. Despite being so young, he was already a 2-star knight. Rumors circulated that he had started sensing mana after just 6 months of training and had reached 1 star in less than 3 years. Moreover, his swordsmanship was said to be incredible. The women were all curious, wanting to know the boy's name. After practice, Jonathan would often say that was enough for the day, but Chris would get up and ask to practice just one more time. That kind of determination excited Jonathan because the boy not only had talent but also worked hard. To him, Chris was a genius. But there was his genius now being thoroughly beaten by Roman, who cruelly watched him lying on the ground. While Chris lay unconscious, Romero called out to Jonathan, asking what happened as he had heard that Chris was a 2-star knight. The problem was that not even Jonathan could grasp how strong Roman had become. What Roman had displayed was the skill of someone who should have had years of training. Considering that just a month ago he had been doing nothing but complaining, it seemed impossible that he had changed so much. But nothing made sense, so Jonathan simply told Romero that Roman was a genius in swordsmanship. Roman, meanwhile, was just laughing as he looked at Chris, who was still unconscious. He was impressed by how aggressive and focused Chris was. With the skill he had shown, Chris could easily have taken down the Blood Fangs as well. It was easy to see why Jonathan was proud to have him as a protege. But to the Celestial Demon, Chris was one of the weakest. Even the weakest warriors of the Celestial Demon sect were stronger than this. However, that strange power Chris had displayed at the end had really caught his attention. As another Joker started to emerge, Romero began laughing like a madman. Once again, everyone was confused. But of course, Romero said it was great to see this. To him, it was incredible to have a son who was a genius in swordsmanship. He asked Jonathan if he was sure. Jonathan replied that it was impossible for someone to have evolved so much without being a genius. Naturally, the father was all smiles. He called Roman over, telling him to come closer. Romero said it had been a long time since he had been this happy, and that he wanted to applaud his son. To him, Roman deserved whatever he wanted, so he could ask for anything. Roman smiled and mentioned the war that was going to happen in 6 months. His father was already certain that Roman would ask not to go and asked what it was. However, Roman's request was the right to choose whoever he wanted to go with him. Romero was confused and even a bit stunned. He tried to suggest that Roman could return to Flora and back out of this, but Roman simply said that he wanted to go. This surprised his father, who then said he understood. Roman would have the right to take whoever he wanted to that war and anything related to it. Roman then said he had one more request, and his father told him that as long as he acted properly, he could ask for anything. Roman made his second request while looking at Chris, who was still unconscious. When Chris awoke, he asked why he had to teach Roman about aura. Jonathan simply replied that it was the master's order. However, Chris protested, saying this was too much. He didn't even know Roman, and after having been in a coma for so long, it was embarrassing. Now, on top of everything, he had to teach aura to this guy. He said he would rather have his head cut off. Jonathan interrupted and made a proposal. If Chris could use the opportunity of teaching Roman to learn why Roman had changed so much, he would gain the right to learn any technique Jonathan had been hiding from him. Immediately, Chris got up, excited, asking if it was true, and Jonathan confirmed it. Now Chris was eager because he was certain this would be easy, and he would definitely receive the secret to becoming a 3-star knight. Of course, he didn't want to seem too enthusiastic, but he told Jonathan to keep his word. Inside the castle, someone called out to Roman, saying they had heard about the incredible duel he had today. It was Hans who remarked how amazing it was that Roman had defeated a 2-star knight. Roman asked if he knew what this 2-star aura business was. Hans admitted he didn't know much but said it was related to the ability to use mana. Our protagonist then mused that it seemed to be called mana in this place. He was sure the power Chris had used was a key explosion, but the way they utilized it was completely different from how it was used in the Mirim world. Here, it was called aura, and one detail he had noticed was that it was a total waste. Even though he didn't understand why they used ki in this way, he knew he needed to learn more about this power and how people utilized it. But during tomorrow's training, he was confident he would get the answers he needed. The next morning, Roman stood face to face with Chris, who was clearly not happy. However, Roman wasn't much different, until the boy let out a little chuckle, which immediately made Chris angry. He tried to calm himself down and said he would explain what aura was. He explained that aura was nothing more than the use of mana from a knight's perspective. Mages also use mana, but they create circles and spells to do so, while knights use it around their bodies. The first person to explore the use of mana was Emperor Alexander. He was the first to discover that it was possible to use mana to strengthen the body, and aura was the ability to release it instantly. This allowed someone to use much more strength than normal. However, Chris mentioned that the history wasn't very important since only a few people could use mana. 1 in 1,000 could become a knight, and 1 in 10,000 could become a mage. That's why discovering whether you have the affinity is the most important thing, as the minimum talent required to become a knight with aura is the ability to at least sense mana. He said that it took him half a year, but achieving it in a year was above average. Roman acknowledged this and asked Chris to explain how to sense this mana. Chris agreed while thinking that Roman was full of himself after winning that fight. However, it was a shame, as talent in swordsmanship and in mana were two completely different things. Now Roman would experience the harsh reality through this training. But the premise of this training was flawed from the start. Roman had already sensed the mana of this world, and using the techniques he learned as the celestial demon, he was storing part of it in the center of his body. He was only here to understand why they did things this way, even if it wasn't the right way. He wanted to comprehend why they did things this way. Chris started walking around and told Roman to feel everything that came into contact with his body. Once he got used to sensing the mana, he could start thinking about trying to manifest it. When he succeeded in manifesting it, he would become a 1-star knight. However, there were various ways to manifest aura. It could be applied to a sword or, for example, cover the body. He was about to continue his explanation when he noticed something. Roman was already standing beside him with his mana activated. Poor Chris didn't even know what to say. The boy was actually manifesting aura, but Roman could only think that he knew very well that the way people use ki in this world was garbage. In his world, you purify the energy and concentrate it within your body, whereas in this world, they simply expect mana to naturally accumulate in their bodies. In the Mirim world, mana is scarce and dense, meaning it's difficult to accumulate but also doesn't move much. Here, however, mana is abundant but extremely light, causing it to escape the body as easily as it enters. The two methods weren't even comparable since in Mirim, you usually strengthen both the exterior and interior of your body. In this world, the exterior isn't strengthened and mana isn't accumulated. Not to mention that spreading energy everywhere is completely inefficient. If Roman used such a method, he wouldn't reach the top 10 even in 100 years. Shocked, Chris asked how Roman had done it. Roman replied that Chris probably already knew the answer. Chris insisted that this was exactly why he was asking, since it took him at least half a year. He demanded Roman tell the truth, accusing him of pretending not to know how to use mana just to show off now. It was starting to make sense why Chris had lost. Roman commented on Chris' assumption that he was hiding his powers, saying that Chris was just assuming what he wanted. But poor Chris was struggling to understand what was happening, knowing it took him 10 years to reach 2 stars. Suddenly, Roman started laughing and Chris asked what was so funny. Roman just remarked that Chris was amusing. Chris, now more upset, asked if Roman was saying that his efforts were funny. Roman then asked if, in all those 10 years of climbing the ranks, Chris had ever once questioned the methods he was being taught. Chris was about to respond, but Roman cut him off, saying that ordinary people are like that. They assume that what has been passed down through countless generations is always correct. When he was learning aura, he wondered why people were so fixated on this method when it clearly had flaws. Was it because they didn't know any better? Or was their faith in Captain Jonathan too strong? But the truth is, people follow it because it's the easiest thing to do. Ronan continued, saying he wouldn't deny that Chris had worked hard for 10 years, but he found it really funny that Chris had never questioned the purpose of what he was doing. Ronan then walked away, saying that nothing in this world reaches a perfect state. Even things he once held as certainties were different in the past and changed over time. Roman knew that questioning oneself like this leads to suffering, especially when, after countless attempts, you end up failing. That's where you have to go against everyone's criticism and your own despair. However, even if that's the case, change is necessary. That's how Roman ignored his father's teachings and created his own art. He then told Chris that they would end the training there. At that moment, Chris called out to Roman and asked him what he should do from now on. The scene shifted to a flashback. A man asked a boy if he was going to continue suffering or if he would admit defeat. From now on, the Blood Demon sect would follow Bake. The only thing the man wanted to know was how he could become as strong as Bach. He was determined to dedicate his body and soul to him as long as they both became stronger, but he needed to know what he should do from now on. Roman recognized this as someone who had let go of their pride and said that it was interesting. The blood demon was someone so powerful that he unified all the sects. As someone who dominated the Merim world, it was inevitable that he would eventually face back, and in the end, after a long battle, he was defeated. Roman remembered that the child from the past had swallowed his pride and asked for guidance. The desire to become stronger at the cost of one's pride reminded him of the blood demon. He told Chris that he was asking about ways to become stronger, but unfortunately, he didn't know what to say to that. Confused, Chris asked what he should do then. Roman replied that he had already given the answer. The only thing he couldn't do was blindly follow what he had been taught. If Roman taught him anything, Chris would be following another lesson blindly. So what Chris needed to do was seek the answer on his own. The only hint Roman gave was to stay by his side from now on. In 6 months, Roman would go to the battlefield, where Chris would see him defeating countless enemies and becoming stronger. And if in 10 years Chris was still by Roman's side, Roman was sure that by then, Chris would have found the answer. That same night, Chris lay isolated in bed. He recalled everyone saying that the right thing to do was to train until he began to feel human. He remembered the teachings passed down to him by Jonathan, even the time when he was told he had become a 2-star knight. But Roman's laughter, mocking him for never questioning, filled him with anger. Someone asked what this was all about. Jonathan wanted to know if Chris was sure, as Chris had just said that he would go to the battlefield in 6 months with Roman. Jonathan asked if something had happened, and Chris confirmed that something had. They locked eyes for a moment, and the captain admitted that it seemed Chris had a reason for doing this. From now on, Chris would no longer be part of the Dmitri Knights. No matter what happened, Jonathan hoped that Chris could protect Roman on the battlefield. Chris simply thanked him, but at that moment, Jonathan realized that Chris was no longer the little boy he had found on the battlefield, desperately clinging to a dead woman. Jonathan said that if the Chris he knew really wanted to follow Roman, then it seemed that Roman was no longer an idiot. He told Chris to follow him, as from now on he would be prepared. If Chris wanted to survive on the battlefield, he would need a secret weapon that he could call his own. Now the knight was excited. The scene shifted to the city, where everyone was talking about a certain rumor that the idiot of the Dmitri family had wiped out all the blood fangs. Kevin, from the beginning of the story, was there listening to people saying that Roman had really kept his word. He believed it might be true, as he had seen Roman take down 3 men with just a stick in his hand. But could it really be that Roman did this because he had kept his word? Kevin concluded that no, Roman wouldn't go that far just for someone like him. At that moment, his boss asked why he was standing there thinking and told him to get back to work. Kevin thought about how all he wanted was to be strong enough to protect his family. He knew that there were still dozens of people like the Bloodfangs in the world. But as a peasant, how could he become stronger? Training wasn't an option, he wouldn't even get a chance. Just then, someone called out to him, causing the crate he was holding to fall to the ground. It was Roman, who said that it had been a while since they last saw each other. Kevin asked what Roman was doing there, but then quickly corrected himself and threw himself to the ground, thanking Roman for saving his family. Roman asked if things had improved, and Kevin confirmed that they had. The Bloodfangs were no longer pursuing them, and he had even found a job. The only thing Kevin didn't know was how to express his gratitude. Ronan told him not to worry because there would be an opportunity as soon as Kevin heard his proposal. His family would never have to worry about money again. Additionally, they would have a house and good food. They wouldn't need to work in exhausting places anymore. Kevin's entire family could be blessed with this new life. But the price was that Kevin would have to swear loyalty and live for Roman. Kevin was silent for a moment before he bowed his head to the ground, saying he would live for Roman. He would die if Roman asked and kill if Roman commanded. If Roman promised to take care of his family, that would be more than enough. Roman saw that Kevin was the kind of person who showed loyalty with his own blood. In his past life, the Mad Demon was someone who could wipe out entire clans with just one word. Maybe that's why as soon as he thought of summoning someone, Kevin's name came to mind. It was truly worth it to see the boy again, and Roman said that from this point forward, Kevin was his. Back at the Dmitri castle, Roman handed Kevin over to Hans and asked him to help the boy adjust. Roman mentioned that he would return later, and Kevin expressed his gratitude for everything. With that, they left and Roman headed to the library. Roman began studying the path of the Aura Knights. The first stage was the manifestation, which qualified someone as a 1-star knight. To reach 2 stars, one would need to cut through steel with her aura. At 3 stars, one transcended logical comprehension and was treated as someone special in any kingdom. On the Salamandra continent, there were a few 6-star knights, but no one had ever heard of someone reaching the 7th rank. Even among the 10 strongest in the world, not all were 6-star knights. Roman mused that given Chris's strength, Jonathan must be a 3-star knight, and that 6 stars in this world were practically incomprehensible. The aura of someone like that could reach 12 meters in height and impact the entire world. Currently, there were only 12 6-star knights in the entire world. Roman realized that these individuals were indeed powerful, especially if they could achieve such feats in an inefficient way. On the other hand, there were the so-called archmages, a title given to a sorcerer who reached 7 circles. In this world, they were considered half-god, half-human, as they could bring destruction wherever they went. A single spell from someone like that could split the sky in 2. Unfortunately, magic was something that didn't exist in the Mirim world, and now he at least had some idea about it. As unlikely as it was, he knew he couldn't afford to make an enemy of someone like that for the time being. The fact that he couldn't predict anything about them made everything more dangerous. But Roman wasn't someone who could live in a bubble. He enjoyed experiencing everything and reading overall. This would indeed be interesting. Now it was time to truly begin. The scene shifted to Hans opening a room. Roman asked what it was for. A servant explained that it was the old forge, and no one had access to that place anymore. Roman remarked that it was the perfect place to train. He told Hans that he would be staying there for the next week and that no one should enter or bring him food. Roman made Hans swear that unless his people were in grave danger, he wouldn't let anyone inside. Hesitantly, Hans agreed. With that, Roman was left alone. He noticed that the room was filled with straw because Hans had put it there to make things more comfortable. Roman appreciated the gesture but preferred to do without it. All these days, he had been accumulating energy in the center of his body, but it was time to start developing the techniques he used in his past life. He activated the first stage of the Celestial Demon's art. First, he would circulate all the energy to remove impurities from his body. The cultivation process was aggressive, with blood pouring out everywhere. Roman knew this would happen, which is why he had accumulated the right amount of energy. He didn't have time to waste and needed to regain his past strength as quickly as possible. The first stage of this technique was called the human stage, and it was the first step toward his goal. The scene then shifted to a week later. A bald man offered to bring tea and drinks for Count Lawrence and Miss Flora. The Lawrence entered and asked where Roman was. The bald man explained that Roman was currently handling some business and then closed the door, leaving them inside. Lawrence remarked that it was clear they weren't welcome there. He told his daughter they would have to wait and instructed her to sit down. He then called her by name and explained that he had arranged this meeting to reverse the mistake she had made. Flora replied that she understood perfectly. Back in the moment when he had shouted upon discovering that she had broken off the engagement, Flora explained that she had already discussed her situation with Roman and even tried to follow her father's advice. But he interrupted her, calling her by name and reminding her that he had always believed she was an intelligent child, so he hadn't expected her to do something like this. She needed to understand that the Barco family had borrowed a large sum of money from the bank, which meant that a war would soon begin. The marriage with the Dmitri family wasn't just a decision. It was inevitable because they were the only family capable of standing against the Barcos in this region. Flora argued that the Lawrence family wasn't weak and questioned why they thought they couldn't win without the Dmitris. Her father explained that the government had approved all the documents without even checking anything. And if the bank itself had lent so much money, it showed that this matter had already escalated beyond these families. This battle was designed for them to lose, and they would use that defeat to take everything they had. He would lose the land, the honor, and even her, who was known as the flower of the Lawrence family. In the present, Flora reflected that she knew all of this. She understood the decisions and why her father had made them. Yet she had ignored it all for selfish reasons. She needed to wake up to reality since she couldn't live like a flower forever. Meanwhile, Renzo was wandering around, wondering what he should do. As soon as Roman appeared, he would have to tell him that Flora had been waiting for him since the morning. The problem was that it was already late afternoon, but at the same time, Roman had also told him not to disturb him. Finally, the door opened. Renzo, all radiant, called out for the young master, but he was in for a shock. However, the scene shifts back to Lawrence. He already expected this treatment because of Flora's mistake. He knows that the Lawrences need this political marriage, but even so, this didn't sit right with him. Suddenly, he stands up and Flora calls out to him. He announces that he's going to sort this out and find Baron Dimitri on his own. Someone calmly takes a few notes. Then suddenly, Lawrence opens the door and asks why he's making a visit and waiting so long. If he's dissatisfied, he could have just said so. He never expected the Dimitris to be so petty. However, Romero is just standing there observing. He says he understands what he said, but asks if today's meeting was scheduled in advance. The Baron mentions that he understands that he showed up unannounced, but it's been a week since he's been asking to speak with Roman. If, at least, they had refused from the start, they wouldn't have been offended. However, Romero asks why he would refuse a visit from the Lawrences. But now, he wants to know if that's all he has to say, and if really he barged into this room to complain about being tired of waiting until noon. On the day Flora visited, Roman himself said he wanted to end that marriage. Even though they argued with the boy, he is sure Flora didn't want that marriage either. Even if it was a disgrace to the Dimitris, he decided to say nothing and stay quiet like a fool. After all, it was she who came there just to say it wouldn't work out. Even though at the beginning of it all, it was the Lawrences who were pushing for it to happen. And now he's there, barging into the room and complaining just because he had to wait for a while. Even worse, for a meeting that wasn't even scheduled. And he has the nerve to complain as if it's his fault. He then reveals that not long ago he received a message from the Barcos. It was an offer for a political marriage where they would gain connections with the central government and a piece of the Lawrence's land. Even so, he decided to refuse that offer and asks him why he thinks he did that. Lawrence, who also questions this, wonders because to him, it would obviously be more advantageous to ally with the Barcos. Roman says the reason is simple. The Dimitris have enough power for him to choose whatever path he wants. And since his eldest son liked the young lady from the Lawrence family, that was the reason he opposed the Barcos. At that moment, Lawrence realizes he messed up because of his foolish ego. The father says he understands his son's reputation for being an idiot, and that the fame of the two doesn't match. But even so, he needs to keep in mind what kind of family they are. Roman's name completely changes the moment the Dimitri family is associated with him. And that's why those who should be desperate for this marriage aren't them, but in fact the Lawrence family. Or perhaps did he misunderstand something? Suddenly, Flora remembered the days she used to go to the academy when she was younger. That was the place where many children from renowned families went to build their knowledge as nobles. However, there was one family from the north that had only one person there. The boy was so quiet that one could question if he really existed. That was the son of the Joel family. In a place where the children believed they were treasures born into this world, he was distant. Until one day, he made a small mistake. For the other children, that wouldn't mean anything, even if they made big mistakes. However, in his case, it resulted in a disciplinary committee. And on the day the teacher scolded him, the father approached and apologized. He begged for his son to be forgiven and said he would teach him better. At that moment, from a distance, she could only think of one thing. She felt sorry for him. However, right now, all of this seems funny to her. The Viscount apologizes and says he has nothing to say. Meanwhile, Flora realizes she had no right to feel sorry for that boy. And the Viscount says his daughter made a mistake out of immaturity. At that time, Joel was weak, and this is the same case for the Lawrences today. Once again, the father apologizes, saying that his entrance was disrespectful, and Flora understood that the weak had no choice but to bow to the strong. It was then that she began to lean forward to apologize to Romero. However, at that moment, someone entered. From the door, they announced that Master Roman had arrived, and Flora realized she had learned this lesson too late. Roman had dyed his hair white, and he was all dark now. He entered the room and announced that Roman Dimitri greeted his father. Everyone was confused, and the father asked if he had finished his training. He said yes, so he replied that they could discuss it later. He was called there to discuss the marriage with the Lawrences. All of this had started because of a decision he made, so he would respect any choice he made. Roman quickly understood what he was trying to say. He knew the significance of the alliance between those two families. At this moment, when the Lawrences are in danger, the wealth of the Dimitris would serve as protection. The father asks if he requested this marriage even knowing that. Roman said that at the time he thought that was enough of a reason. However, everything changed when he met her for the first time, and she immediately talked about canceling the engagement. She had certainly heard the rumors and decided she wouldn't marry someone like him because of that. This means that all of her decisions were based on what others said. Regardless of how society judges them, he wants to be with someone who only believes in what they experience and see. And it is for this reason that he votes to end the engagement. At that moment, the room fell silent. Lawrence thought that now it was the end of everything, as this marriage was the last card they had. No other family would accept a political marriage in this situation. This means they would have to solve their problems with their own power. The problem is that if the Dimitris and the Barcos really combined forces, it wouldn't stand a chance. He needed to do something to at least prevent that. He then bowed and said that the Lawrences took full responsibility for this. As an apology, they would no longer collect any taxes from a Dimitri merchant passing through their territory. He knew this wasn't much for someone as wealthy as they were, but it was a way to show they were sorry. Romero said he couldn't accept that, as the Dimitris couldn't profit from his son's future. All they would need to do is announce that it was Flora who canceled, and they wouldn't join forces with the Barcos. Lawrence simply thanked him. Of all his fears, this was the greatest. And with that, they left the room. Not before he looked back just to see Dimitri standing there. If he had known the potential of this young man a little earlier, he would have been more assertive when he spoke with Flora. In the end, he too had made a big mistake. Romero then called Roman and asked what had happened to him in the past week. In that training, all he did was remove impure energy to advance the human state. This is the basis of the techniques he created, and it's nothing impressive in the Miram world. The problem is that, since this place has abundant mana, it accumulated in the body, and the purification of something like that created a miraculous effect. From his outward appearance, like the skeletal changes, it was evident that he had become a different person. He then simply tells his father that he achieved an awakening on his own, and that this change occurred because he started to feel mana flowing through his body. Romero was startled since this was supposed to take years. He had heard of a natural phenomenon where mana starts to circulate, but it happened to very few people. However, the boy was achieving one feat after another since he managed to take down the Blood Fangs. All of this defied logic, but he couldn't forget that the boy was still his son. Romero then said that regardless of the challenges he faced, he would not leave him alone. And the boy should never forget that his name is Roman Dimitri, because his father would always support him. At that moment, Baker recalled a flashback. On one of the days when he was being trained, his father always thought he was a pathetic bastard. The man in front of him wasn't cold or cruel. He didn't even push him to the brink of death. He then thanked Romero, while thinking that it wasn't so bad after all. When he left the room, someone called out to him. It was Flora, all awkward, not knowing what to say. She apologized for judging him so hastily and causing trouble for both families. He simply walked away, saying she didn't need to apologize. After all, he hadn't planned on accepting it from the beginning. She continued, saying that she understood he didn't like it. Even though it was something meant for both of them, she was the one who decided to break that promise. However, there was something she wanted to say while she still had the chance. The reason she broke off the engagement. It was at a social gathering in the north where the nobles gathered. The moment they found out she had been promised the Dimitris, they started spreading all sorts of terrifying rumors. And the worst of all was discovering that he and Roman Dimitri used drugs. This one came from Dare. She knew that drugs eat away at reason and intelligence. She just wanted him to know this. She didn't know if they were true or false. It's just that she couldn't ignore it. Roman cut her off and said that whatever happened didn't matter since it didn't change the relationship they had. She didn't need to worry about him anymore. The poor thing was left there abandoned. Later that night, she had a conversation with Hans. He found it strange that she mentioned drugs since he didn't feel anything like that in this body. Even though there were some impurities, that metamorphosis had already removed all of that. He then called for Hans and asked if he had ever heard of him using drugs or doing anything like that. The guy was all confused, unsure if he should answer or not, but Roman said he wouldn't reprimand him. He was just trying to understand better the choices he had made in life. Hans, excited, said that not with his own eyes. However, there were moments when he thought the boy's behavior was a bit strange. Roman then asked when that was. Hans explained that the last time was 15 days ago when he saw him returning from a social gathering. Nothing major happened at that place, but the moment he returned, he seemed to be in a strange state. After that, he seemed to have lost the will to live and stayed in his room all day. Not to mention that every night he asked for an excessive amount of alcohol. This was one of the reasons Hans suspected he was using drugs. But now that he thinks about it, it really seems like a foolish idea. He remembers Flora mentioned those noble gatherings and asks who organized that party. Hans says it was the eldest son of the Barcos named Anthony. Roman begins to realize that all of this is very suspicious. The moment others find out he's going to be her fiancé, he suddenly takes his own life. Now he has a rough idea of what happened. There were some things that bothered him about Roman's death. In the message, it only said that he was afraid to go to battle, and that's why he took his own life. However, at that time, the marriage to Flora had already been decided, but he didn't mention anything about it. Not to mention that it would have been extremely easy for him to avoid the war with this marriage. But even with all of this, he took his life out of fear. Something about it didn't make sense. Roman then asked if he and this Anthony had always been close. Hans said they had been friends for a long time, but recently things didn't seem to be going well. It started when that marriage proposal with the Lawrences came up, because that would create a huge obstacle for the Barcos who wanted to conquer the Lawrence lands. And the quickest way was to prevent that marriage from happening. This confirmed to Roman that these guys were behind that letter. Hans then mentions that a few days ago, another letter with an invitation to a Barcos party arrived. This makes Buck curious. Hans explains that he didn't deliver it because Roman was in isolated training and asks what he should do with it. Now Roman laughs because it seems these guys are underestimating him. And that's one of the things the celestial demon hates the most. He asks when the party will be, and Hans says in 2 weeks. With that, Roman orders him to inform him that he will definitely attend. The scene shifts to the next day. Kevin was being guided to speak with Roman. However, Hans had already warned him not to be surprised by his change in appearance. He entered and asked if Roman had called for him. Roman turned and confirmed. But at that moment, Kevin was startled and asked what had happened to the young master. Beck ignored this and asked if he was adjusting. Kevin said yes, that the place was very good, and he had no problems. However, there was just one detail. He was still trying to understand what his role would be in this place. He offered to live for Roman's sake, but he didn't know what an ordinary and commoner like him could do. Roman simply said that he would be used as one of his swords. Kevin asked what that meant. Roman once again ignored him and said that it was impossible to choose someone's path for them. So he would give him 3 options. If he was afraid of killing, he wouldn't be a sword, but instead the hands and feet. He would learn everything from Hans to become a loyal follower. The second option was to become the sword and protect him by his side. Kevin interrupted, saying he had never used a sword, so it was impossible. Roman said he had already figured the boy would say that. He explained that if he chose this option, he would have to go through skeletal contortion. Obviously, the boy wanted to know what that was. Roman explained that it was a process where the pain caused would make a person feel as if their bones and muscles were being broken. In this way, he would prove his determination and potential through pain, not words. He drew his sword and said that the last option was for him to take it and cut off his own hand. If he could endure causing pain to himself and withstanding it until the end, he would become stronger than anyone. Back remember that even the mad demon who knew nothing of martial arts became a king. All of this depended solely on his own willpower. Ronan told him to choose because, regardless of the option, he would make it worthwhile. The only thing he was choosing was how he would be used. In an abandoned cabin outside Dimitri Castle. That was where Kevin was born. He was young and had to work to survive. Since he always had to help with everything, there was nothing he didn't know how to do. However, his life changed. No matter how much effort he made, there was always someone to take what was his. That was the life of someone weak. And that's why he couldn't forget what he saw. The overwhelming strength of Roman that day. He couldn't understand what cutting off his hand would explain, nor this business of destroying one's own body. However, if that meant becoming as strong as Roman, he said he would do it. The boy Roman was just watching, and Kevin prepared to make the cut. He took a deep breath and raised the sword. At the moment, he shouted and went to make the cut. Meanwhile, outside, Chris was talking about how he decided to follow the young master. But right after that, he decided to enter isolated training. He found Hans and asked where Roman was. Hans said the boy was training with Kevin but warned that no one was allowed to enter. Chris had never heard of this kid and asked who this Kevin was. Man, I thought he wasn't going to cut it, but the boy really did it, and Roman just stood there watching. But at night, Hans saw the sword and asked why it was covered in blood. But the boy only said there was nothing to worry about. That blood wasn't his. The truth is, Roman planned to put the boy in an illusion. That was the charm of the demon's illusion. The problem is that he made the cut before he could activate it. If he hadn't done something, the boy would have really cut off his entire arm. There were still 2 weeks until the party, and 6 months until the war. But Roman was eager because he had a lot of people to teach. Soon he would be very busy. In a room, he said that the mana cultivation technique he was going to teach was very dangerous. Kevin asked if he was really going to learn about mana. Roman simply said yes, but in reality, what he was going to teach was a technique from the mad demon himself. It was a spiritual art that consumed the user's mind in exchange for power. However, that could only be used by someone who could withstand extreme pain. And it was by putting the mad demon through that process that he managed to make him useful. If the boy didn't hesitate even to cut his arm, Roman believed he could learn it. He warned that it was a technique that would make him stronger. However, the pain would be much greater than yesterday. Even with all that, there was only one reason he was teaching it. Not only was it the fastest way for an untrained teenager to grow stronger, but it was also a technique that would allow him to protect whoever he wanted when he reached his peak. Kevin got excited and called for the young master. He said he couldn't express how grateful he felt, but he just didn't understand why Roman trusted him so much. He might have sworn loyalty, but nothing would stop him from running away after learning it. That's why he wanted to know why Roman trusted him so much. But the boy just said he trusted him because he did. Obviously, that left the boy even more confused. But Roman ignored him and told him to rest because the training would start tomorrow. Still, he thought that the mad demon had asked the exact same question. But unconditional trust is only received when you believe in the person. However, he knew Kevin wouldn't betray him. As soon as he became stronger, he would realize how dangerous it is to betray the celestial demon. It makes sense, right? Who would dare betray that guy? The next day, they were already practicing. Roman was teaching him the step-by-step of swordsmanship, how to maintain focus on each movement. Meanwhile, Chris was watching everything from the side. He was dying of boredom and didn't understand any of it. Why was Roman teaching swordsmanship to a guy who seemed to have no talent at all? Or worse, why wasn't he learning anything? He thought he'd get stronger if he followed this guy, but he was being treated like he didn't even exist. Maybe it would be better to go back to his master and ask to be accepted again. But he decided that for now, he'd wait a little longer. And so a few days passed. He threw his gloves on the ground, walked up to Roman, and called out to him, saying it had been 2 weeks since he decided to follow him. In the first week, he did the isolated training, and now in the second, he was there being ignored while he trained Kevin. He apologized for how he acted in the beginning, but he wanted to learn anything. Roman looked at him and said that he had already told him to learn just by watching. Obviously, Chris had no idea what he was talking about, but Roman warned that everyone has their own way of learning. Kevin didn't know anything, so until he reached a certain level, he needed to train. However, on the other hand, Chris was different, and no matter what Roman taught him because he had been defeated, he would accept any teaching without questioning it twice. Chris asked if he was really just going to keep observing. Roman said no and tossed a sword to him. He warned that he needed results to accept the truth, and that's why there would be a duel against Kevin. The poor kid was malnourished, but he would have to take a beating to develop his technique. Roman explained that he would teach Kevin how to defeat Chris, and Chris had to defeat him. If Chris truly believed he was right after this duel, then Roman would teach him personally. Poor Kevin was in shock, realizing he would have to fight a real knight. And Chris, of course, didn't want to duel with a novice. But once again, he got angry and wondered what Roman thought of him. But he decided that fine, he would show that he wasn't that weak now. With that, the two faced each other. Kevin said that no matter the situation, it didn't make sense for him to fight a 2-star knight. Ronan said it was obvious he was at a disadvantage, but he had nothing to lose by being defeated. There are countless people in this world who are stronger than him. Just as his family was oppressed by the Bloodfangs and Chris was trying to oppress him. Is he always going to back down when he encounters someone like that? Kevin, determined, said that he would try once. That made Chris even angrier, seeing a novice thinking he had a chance to win. He couldn't understand what Roman thought he would gain from this fight. But whatever, a duel is a duel. The second Roman gave the signal, Chris was already in front of him. There was no way he could lose to this beginner who had only a week of training. And with that, he landed the first attack squarely. Kevin noticed something and thought about making a move with his sword. However, Chris immediately knocked his arm aside and landed a hit right on his stomach. The poor kid was thrown far away, and he landed all twisted on the ground. Chris even thought it was weird that the boy was so weak. He thought there was a reason behind this duel that Roman would help with, but he was just standing there doing nothing. He couldn't understand what that madman was thinking. But either way, he was going to end this. Time passed, and our boy was just smiling, while poor Kevin was being beaten. Once again, he fell to the ground. Chris admitted that he was much better than he had thought, and for someone without mana, he really did much more than expected. But it was time to give up. After all, in the attacks he blocked, Chris hadn't even used all his strength. He could have split the boy's head in half, but in a duel, he avoided doing that. However, Kevin didn't seem very inclined to give up, and Chris said he would warn him one last time. If he planned to keep fighting, he wouldn't take responsibility for any broken limbs. But Kevin just laughed. Ronan smiled and Chris was confused, and the boy replied that he wanted to see how this would end. Roman once again told them both to prepare, when suddenly Kevin heard someone tell him to concentrate because he was about to take a surprise attack. Ronan gave the signal for the fight to begin and Chris lunged, but this time Kevin blocked the first strike. The voice told him to step aside and aim at Chris's chest, but he got tangled up and stumbled. With that, Chris once again knocked his arm aside and landed a hit on his stomach. Kevin fell to the ground and the voice told him to get up. That's when he noticed that strangely, it seemed like he was hearing Roman's voice. Roman explained that this was a mana fluctuation technique that allowed sound to be transferred. He was using small particles near his ear so that only he could hear. Kevin had no idea something like that was possible. And at that moment, Roman told him to dive to the right. He did so and Chris missed the attack. Roman then told him to turn and aim at the left side of Chris's chest. He went to make the strike, but Chris dodged and landed a hit squarely on his ribs. Kevin realized what he lacked was speed. The voice told him to block the overhead attack and wake up, and he barely avoided another hit to the stomach. The voice told him to escape to the right, but once again, he took a hit to the face. The boy was really getting beaten, even with instructions. Chris remained impressed that the kid wouldn't give up, and Roman realized that the boy didn't stand a chance, since he couldn't respond quickly enough to the commands. However, for Roman, the situation was quite interesting. This was because Kevin was smiling, thinking that Roman was omnipotent. Even though Chris was a 2-star knight, Roman could give him the perfect commands to win. Kevin knew that the problem was his own body. If he had been following the tips correctly, he would have been winning. He realized that the true person being manipulated in that fight was Chris. He received a tip and once again dodged. At that moment, Roman told him to advance and try a counterattack, which Chris barely managed to dodge as well. But then Chris retaliated with a punch to his face. Chris began to realize that he was no longer able to knock the boy out and was only landing weak blows. And Kevin realized that even the esteemed knight, whom everyone thought was a genius, was extremely weak compared to Roman. For Kevin, that was the type of person he wanted to serve forever as his lord. So even if Roman said something that made no logical sense, he would just follow the orders blindly. For someone like him to become a true sword, there was only one answer. He would have to do it through sheer willpower. Some time passed. Kevin was still in the same situation, and Chris warned him for the 10th time, the last time, that if he continued like this, he would have to take responsibility if he got injured. But once again, Kevin smiled, and the scene repeated itself perfectly, with Kevin saying he wanted to see it through to the end. But then Chris lost his temper, calling him insignificant. If that's really what he wanted, he would give him what he was looking for. He would leave the boy with a crippled arm, and he would regret this moment. But Roman warned him to take a step forward and stop the attack halfway. The strike had to carry all the force he had, and Chris soon realized he had put himself in a bad position. However, he managed to move aside. Chris couldn't believe the kid had the courage to step forward in such a situation, and Roman told Chris to calm down because it wasn't over yet. He had to turn and go forward once more, and there he was obeying blindly. But Chris got angry because the attack was slow and full of openings, but he was startled. Once again, Kevin had set a trap and dodged, and now it was Chris who had no way to dodge. And with that, the strike was made. Roman was just smirking, and Chris couldn't believe it. He had almost been defeated by a boy who had been training for a week. Angry, he got up and struck Kevin's hand, making him drop the sword. Exhausted, the boy fell to the ground. Roman was just standing on the side, watching. He was impressed that Chris had really noticed that the second attack would be a feint. Chris only thought that the boy was a crazy fool, but Roman walked over and said that indeed Chris had won. So if he wanted, Roman would personally teach him from tomorrow onward. but the choice to learn would be up to him. Sometime later, Chris was worn out. He had no idea why he accepted that fight. He had nothing to gain from it and almost lost in the end. That last move was strangely similar to the one Roman used in their first duel. But what if he hadn't had that experience with Roman? Maybe he wouldn't have beaten Kevin without using mana. With that, yet another wild card in the story started laughing, saying that the day had matured with just that one experience. The next day, Roman asked what he would do. That's when Chris said he didn't want any more teachings, because he would grow stronger just by being by Roman's side. That duel taught him a lot, since Kevin's decisions were always the right ones for each situation. He thought the boy hadn't received any instructions, but in reality he was wrong. Just by trying to understand Kevin's decisions, his mind was already filled with a wealth of teachings. He didn't know what had happened, but Roman was on a level that even Captain Jonathan couldn't reach. If that's the case, until the moment he becomes stronger than Roman, he will observe everything. While our boy smiled, Chris was there looking at him with pure hatred. But Roman simply said that today they would continue with the training. A few days passed, and the date for the Barcos social gathering arrived. A week before that, observing a painting, someone asks if they've heard about it. The fact that Roman Dimitri canceled the marriage with the girl from the Lawrence family. A guy comments that apparently it was Flora's mistake, but people seem to believe that her father just felt sorry for her when he saw the appearance of that Dimitri idiot. Owen says that's crazy, considering they're about to go to war with the Barcos. And the man next to her responds that it just proves the eldest son of the Dimitris is worse than they thought. A maid mentions the fact that he supposedly defeated the Bloodfangs, but another says that's probably a lie just to cover up the end of the marriage and avoid embarrassment. Meanwhile, someone is dying of laughter, saying he can't believe it's so easy to manipulate the boy into breaking the marriage. He asks the butler if the boy will attend the party, and he confirms it. It's Antonio Barco, who says everything is going exactly as he planned. He's very excited for the coming week. On the day of the social gathering, Roman is questioning whether he really has to wear something like that. Hans says that since it's the first meeting after breaking the engagement, he must wear something amazing. He tells a long story about how incredible and expensive those clothes are, but he already knew the boy wouldn't wear them, even if he had spent his whole life preparing that outfit. Roman smiles at this. He says that if Hans puts so much effort into it, then he will wear it. Meanwhile, in front of the carriage, Chris says the boy is taking too long. At that moment, he comes running, apologizing. It's Kevin, who now indeed looks like a child, saying he didn't know how to put on armor. Chris asks why he's like that, and Kevin explains that there was no armor that fit him perfectly. Chris, however, couldn't forget that he almost lost to this kid just because he received help from Roman. The poor boy was all clumsy and didn't even know how to put on a helmet. But at that moment, Chris told him to pay attention. They were not only Roman's escort, but also the face of the Dimitris. This meant their reputation also depended on the actions they took. Kevin said he would keep that in mind. Sir Knight, Chris loved being called a knight and beamed, saying it was good to know Kevin had learned. The scene then shifts to a castle. Inside, many nobles were gathered, all from the most distinguished families in the region. One of them, holding a glass, asked if it's true that Roman will really show up. It's really funny that he's showing up after breaking the engagement that he himself wanted, especially knowing that the Barcos are targeting the Lawrences. A girl says that's why everyone considers him an idiot. Now the Dimitri's position had become completely ambiguous, all because of Roman. Another commented that at least he was going to participate, apparently to try to clean up the mess. The blonde girl asked what this Roman Dimitri was like. The guy next to her just said that he leaves a terrible impression since he's not powerful, not handsome, short, and weak. Another comments that any woman would try to break the marriage if forced into it. At that moment, the butler coughs in the middle of the room and announces that the eldest son of the Dimitris was arriving. With that, our boy appears, obviously shining with his platinum hair. No one could recognize him. The girls were all flustered, wanting to know if that was the Roman Dimitri. It didn't make sense for him to look so different, since he was shorter than everyone before, not to mention that even his hair was different. The blonde girl was now standing there, taken aback, and immediately headed toward him. She said it was an honor to meet him and introduced herself as Sophia from the Gristle family. She said that perhaps he hadn't heard of her family since they were small, but her father dedicated his entire life to the kingdom of Cairo. Roman said he indeed knew them, and she was impressed. Ronan mentioned that it was impossible not to know a family with a history of hundreds of generations. Some time before, Hans had given him a book about all the families in the northern region, but he questioned Roman why he wanted that out of the blue. Roman responded that it was the least courtesy to know a little about the people he would meet. He would know the legacy of each person there and where they came from. That was an effort required for him to win the favor of others, especially for him, who was considered the Dimitri idiot. The boy studied extensively because he even knew they were famous for the quality of the wood they produced, and that one of her brothers recently learned to sense mana. He said he truly congratulates them on these achievements. People were just observing the conversation, wondering what on earth was going on. At that moment, another man introduced himself as the magnate of the Volt family. Roman said it was a pleasure to meet the eldest son of that family. He knew that Viscount Volt had achieved various victories in recent battles. The young man replied that he was grateful that Roman fought that way. Another person with pink hair came to introduce herself, saying that he had changed a lot. But the young man said that Lady Eris was as beautiful as ever. With that, a lot of people continued talking to him, all with smiles. Another approached and said he had judged him wrongly until now because he always thought he was drunk. Roman said he had been thinking of drinking, but if that was the case, he would abstain for a bit. Suddenly, the butler called for Roman and informed him that the young master was calling him to the back room. Finally, Roman was about to discover who was causing trouble for him. Outside the gathering, it was full of knights. Each of those families had brought their soldiers. Kevin asked what the deal was with this social party. Chris told him not to be interested as he would never attend one and ordered him to fix his helmet. A knight was watching what was going on, and one with green hair said that was the Dimitri escort. Kevin was innocently adjusting his helmet when someone burst out laughing and loudly said that it was a joke. He knew the eldest son was abandoned. He just didn't imagine he would bring a child who didn't even know how to hold a sword. Chris just told Kevin to ignore it. However, one of them asked what could be expected. Was that really the level of the Dimitris? The scene shifts to Roman a long time ago. At one of the social gatherings, he saw something. Flora for the first time. That's when Anthony approached and asked who he had his eye on. Roman asked if he knew the blonde-haired girl. His friend replied that she was Flora, known as the flower of the Lawrence family. Obviously, the boy fell in love. And now here's our Roman entering the room. All excited, he asks how much he's changed since they last saw each other. Roman was just observing. Anthony said he knew he had changed, but not this much, and told him to sit down and tell him everything that happened. Roman immediately noticed traces that some other people had been there. The fact that he made everyone leave as soon as Roman arrived meant he had a secret to share. Since Roman decided to make the guy comfortable, Roman then said that he wasn't sure either. He spent a fortune to make some changes in himself, and now, even he had lost track of how much he had changed. But in any case, it was good to see his old friend. Anthony was just observing, and said that indeed, it could be seen positively. He didn't know what the boy was thinking back then. Roman asked what time he was talking about. Anthony mentioned the time he was caught sleeping with his cousin, when he was already promised to the Lawrence daughter. It was truly an incredible time. He found it crazy that he would go so far with his future marriage considering that happened. But if he was here today at this party, it meant he wanted to accept the proposal. And he assured Roman not to worry, that he would keep it a secret. They should discuss his marriage to the Barco family. That was information Roman had no idea about, when suddenly, he felt something strange, and seemed to recall a memory. He remembered betraying Anthony Barco, and begging his father to create a political marriage with the Lawrence family. But even so, he didn't want to avoid his friends, and would use this chance to rebuild the relationship he had with them. That day, Anthony introduced him to Emily Barco. He asked if it was okay for her to drink with them there that day. Roman said Cindy here was part of the family. Anthony told them to serve Roman, but he said he knew how to serve himself. At that moment, the guy changed and asked if he was getting full of himself just because he was going to get married. Roman was confused, but Anthony said he was joking, since they didn't even care about that family anymore. Roman was happy to know there wouldn't be a problem then. And of course, Anthony told him to drink as much as he wanted. And so the poor guy did. What happened next you already know. The boy woke up the next day in bed. He had no idea where he was or what was going on, when suddenly someone burst into the room and shouted his name. It was Anthony, furious, asking what he had done. Roman had no idea because he had just passed out. He didn't remember anything. Sometime later, Anthony said he didn't care who the boy slept with, but this time it had been with Miss Barco, and he couldn't let the matter slide easily. He gave the boy the chance to end that marriage unilaterally, or he would have to marry a direct descendant of the Barco family to improve relations between them. Even though he was furious, he would forgive him because they were friends. However, he would have to give an answer. Back in the present, Back now knew exactly what happened. If what happened that day were discovered, the honor of the Dimitris would be ruined, and Roman didn't have the courage to face his father and confront his anger. On the other hand, he couldn't break the marriage because he truly loved Flora. Since it had been forced by him, it would defame the princess. That's why his decision was to take his own life to resolve the situation. A weak man who never achieved anything with his own hands. That was Roman Dimitri. Truly a miserable and pathetic life. Anthony asked why he was hesitating so much and said that the union of their two families would create something extremely powerful in the region. No one could stand against them, and together they would have all the power in the north. But Roman simply asked if that was the only reason. Confused, Anthony stood still for a moment, and Roman asked if he had to accept this political relationship just because of that reason. Anthony tried to remind him that this wasn't a choice. If he refused, everything that happened that day would be exposed to the world. At that moment, Roman simply put his foot on the table and said that apparently Anthony had forgotten, so he would say it again. Dimitri had no reason to accept the Barcos' proposal. Meanwhile, outside, the gathering was going on smoothly, until something caught Sophia's attention. Of course, it was Roman again, and she asked where he had been. He replied that he had something to resolve, and unfortunately, because of that, he would have to leave. She looked sad, saying she wished he could stay a little longer. He said it was urgent, but everyone was asking him to stay, saying they wanted to talk about many things. But Roman just excused himself and left, until he heard someone telling another to take back what they said. He recognized the voice and tried to get closer. That's when he saw something he didn't expect. A helmet hit the ground, and one of the knights had hit Kevin. Just before that, the man had said that was the level of the Dimitris. Chris just told him to calm down because it wasn't worth it. But the men seemed to have noticed something. They approached, asking why they'd brought a child whose helmet didn't even fit his head. They got closer and said it looked like they picked up a kid from the street and put armor on him to call him an escort. Chris asked if they were training more to be clowns than to use a sword. The man ignored him and said he was confident he could beat this kid without any training. That's why everyone calls their lord an idiot. Kevin told him to take back what he said because he shouldn't refer to Roman like that. The man was confused, but Kevin just grabbed his hand and told him to take back what he said. That's when the man slapped his helmet. The poor kid didn't even react, and Chris thought about drawing his sword, but he knew those were Barco's knights. If he really did that, it would cause chaos between the two families. He wasn't just causing trouble for the young master, but for everyone there. From the ground, Kevin said he was Roman's knight, and that he never wanted to be a knight if it meant being like the bunch of thugs they were. The man just chuckled and moved toward him, saying he wanted to see how far his pride would take him. That's when someone grabbed his wrist. Everyone was in shock. It was Roman, calmly asking what was going on. He just took a look. The moment the man started to say his name, he got slapped in the face. He was completely confused, not understanding what happened. Not only did he get slapped, but he couldn't even react. He was about to say something, but got slapped again, not understanding. Once again, he didn't know where the slap came from. It was becoming a joke. He tried to speak again and got slapped in the ear. The poor guy was already shrinking, and now he was about to kiss the ground. He was starting to get traumatized, not knowing what sequence this was. But Roman simply told him to lift his head again. Meanwhile, in the room, Anthony was there. He couldn't understand what had just happened. At the meeting, he warned Roman that if he didn't accept the proposal, he would be making an irreversible mistake. But Roman just replied that his reputation was already bad, so having one or two more rumors wouldn't change anything. And he warned Anthony that he should behave a little better. He had chosen to cancel this marriage on his own, not because of that threat. But since the Dimitris were no longer allied with the Lawrences, in a way, Anthony's goal had been achieved. However, at any moment, Roman could decide to help the Lawrences, and that would interfere with the Barcos. And maybe he should do that just because of those threats. Roman had already researched a lot about the Barcos. They had an influence with the central government that couldn't be ignored, but that's all they had and nothing more. If one were to truly consider wealth and power, the Dimitris were the real force in the north. He then asked Anthony what he wanted to do. Anthony, fearful, only asked if he was no longer going to help the Lawrences, and Roman replied that he was correct. With that, Anthony said it would be better to forget about this matter. However, he couldn't understand why this boy had changed so much. The way he acted, looked, and even spoke had completely changed. He was no longer the idiot he knew. What he wanted to know was what the hell had happened to this boy. At that moment, someone called for Anthony, who said he didn't want to talk. But the person insisted, saying there was a problem with the knights he had brought. Outside, something was still going on, and everyone was scared. The Barco knight was at Roman's feet, begging for forgiveness and saying he would never do it again. Kevin said the man had already been punished enough, and Chris agreed, saying he should reconsider his relationship with the Barcos. However, Roman said that he was the one who decided when this man had been punished enough. Even if he died, that was the price for his actions. At that moment, Anthony appeared and asked what the meaning of this was. He warned that even if Roman was the eldest son, he wouldn't tolerate such behavior, and it would be better for him to start apologizing. Roman just asked why he would do that. That man had insulted him and laid hands on a member of the Dimitri family. He then asked Anthony if he really thought he was wrong. Anthony responded that regardless, he had crossed the line. Ronan reminded him that if he continued like this, their relationship might be destroyed. So it was best for Anthony to control his actions a bit better. Since he wasn't a patient person, he wanted to know what Anthony was going to do now. Anthony remembered that Roman had threatened to rekindle relations with the Lawrences. As much as he hated it, he had no choice. And he said that indeed, seeing the situation, it seemed Roman was right. He also would have had to punish that man the same way. Roman left, saying that they indeed got along well. But it wasn't over yet. He went up to the soldier, raised his hand, and told the man to prepare his face. This went on for a while. The old Roman was a person everyone disrespected, even though he was from the family that was the greatest power in the north. He called Chris and Kevin and said they were leaving. But now, everyone who was present had no choice but to recognize that the idiot they had heard about no longer existed. On the way back in the carriage, there was silence, and Kevin apologized since Roman had been insulted because of him. And Chris apologized for not doing anything when they spoke ill of the Dimitris. Roman stayed silent for a moment. He said he knew it couldn't have been easy for them to endure that until he arrived. So it was a good job that they managed to hold on. Being hasty would only have led to the worst-case scenario. But that wasn't the answer he wanted. Since no one in the entire North should have the courage to lay hands on the Dimitri family, they've got to remember the faces of those men and never forgive them. Because Roman doesn't accept anyone being above him. And the only ones who can follow him are those who are above everyone else. And they would have to adapt to live that way. Back at the Dimitri mansion, someone handed over papers about the Barco family. It was Hans, who mentioned that lately those guys had been taking some strange actions. Roman already knew that the Barcos had appeared in the northern region over 100 years ago, but they only started gaining relevance when someone from the family entered the central government. Roman commented that their military strength was much weaker than he had thought. Hans agreed, saying it was strange that their status was so high considering they were so weak. Roman said that this proves how strong the central government is. The Salamander continent has 6 kingdoms, and Cairo is the smallest and weakest. That's because it's surrounded by all the others, so they've always been attacked throughout history. Because of the strong enemies at the borders, they were forced to join the central government to survive. That's because their authority in recruitment is absolute. If a family rejects the recruitment, troops are immediately sent to that place. After the kingdom is taken, the lands are divided among those who participated in the conquest. Roman believed that's why the Barcos are currently so influential. And Hans said that apparently, that's the only explanation. And now they knew how they got a big loan from the bank. Probably with that money, they must have bought some mercenary companies. And most likely, the Burgess mercenary company will be hired since they're famous for territorial disputes. Hans said that at the pace things are going, the attack on the Lawrences will happen in half a month. Roman knew that if that's the case, they had nothing left to prepare. Hans commented that if the Barcos really attack, the Lawrences will survive for at most a month. Now Roman was thinking that he had told the Barcos that he wouldn't get involved in the Lawrence case. However, he wouldn't be able to live as Roman Dimitri if he let someone threaten him and get away with it. Not to mention, no matter what the Barcos did, they would never have enough power to defeat the Dimitris. It would be extremely easy to defeat them if he simply used the power of his family. But in this region, because they weren't nobles, no one saw the Dimitris as a threat, and he needed to create an opportunity to enter the grand stage of this world, just as he had done in the past. He then stood up and told Hans that he needed to find his father now. It was time for them to make money from the promise that was made to them. The scene shifts to a lot of scared people in the city, and a man in bloodied armor arriving. It's the rank B mercenary Lucas, who says that apparently the Dimitris haven't changed at all. The scene then shifts to a blacksmith. The man says his items are destroyed, and asks Lucas if the fight was really that difficult. He replies that it was hard because the guys he was with were so dumb, and almost everyone died. The blacksmith says that this sword is of low quality and asks where he bought it. He said he had to grab one from some shop and he almost lost his life because of it. The old man says he should know that the best items and weapons are always made by the Dimitris. Lucas stands up and says he already knows that, which is why he's here to request a full set. To him, it doesn't matter how long it takes since he'll be recovering here in Dimitri. He's already tired of the battlefield. That's when he sees some people gathering and looking at flyers. He wonders why everyone seems so excited. Usually, that only happens when there's a war or a really good job. He decides to take a look, and there's a recruitment notice. The notice only says that the person needs to be healthy and have the desire to get stronger. There are 30 spots and the salaries would be 8 silver coins per month. Lucas thinks that considering a family of 5 lives on 5 silver coins, it's pretty good even considering the risks. That is if it weren't for this special condition. The person would belong to Roman Dimitri and not the entire family, and only those who are willing to risk their lives for him should sign up. The old man next to him tells him not to even dream since hundreds have already applied. Lucas laughs and says that as a rank B mercenary, someone like him would cost at least 50 silver coins. But then he notices what the man said, and asks if hundreds of people have really already registered. The old man says yes, everyone who saw the notice ran to apply. Lucas then asks why everyone is so eager to work for the Dimitri idiot. Imagine the suffering a soldier would endure being under an idiot like that. At that moment, everyone fell silent, and the man only said that Lucas must not be very informed since he's an outsider. Lord Dimitri had taken down the Bloodfangs and was taking care of his people. No one believed it at first until they heard what Clark said. That's because since Clark's son became one of Roman's subordinates, his entire family has changed. He wonders what the boy's name was again, and then he remembers it was Kevin. A little earlier at the mansion, Kevin asked why he wanted to take a break, but Roman only said that rest was part of the training, so he had 3 days to relax. It was a reward for his hard work, so he should enjoy some time with his family. Kevin just thanked him. However, taking a break now felt strange to him, since in the past he couldn't even survive even working every day. He wondered how his family was doing since he had been at the castle for so long. On the way, Hans met him, handed him some clothes and said that